Hello and welcome. If you find yourself fascinated by the ancient horrors that slumber in the dark between the stars, then you are in the right place. Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell, for we are about to descend into a tomb world, and not all who enter will leave with their sanity intact. What you're about to hear is a testament to eternity and its terrible price.
I remember the sin of warmth. It is my first memory, and my most persistent torment. A phantom sensation, a ghost of a feeling that flickers at the edge of my consciousness, a cruel joke played by a universe that has forgotten what it means to be alive. I remember the sun on my skin, a sensation so alien to me now it might as well be a myth. I remember the weight of a breath in my lungs, the drumbeat of a heart that could know fear, or joy, or love. All of it is gone. Now there is only the cold, the perfect, unyielding cold of living metal. I am a king of dust, entombed in a body of necrodermis, my consciousness a flickering ember trapped in a prison designed to last until the stars themselves gutter and die. I am Overlord Akhet-Setek, and I have slept for 60 million years. My awakening is not a gentle return. It is a systems check, a cascade of cold data flooding my mind. Chronometric readings scroll through my awareness, numbers so vast they are meaningless. I have been dormant for geological ages, while empires of flesh rose, flourished, and crumbled to dust. The lesser servitors, mindless constructs of the same metal that imprisons me, attend to my form. Their spindly limbs polish and probe, repairing microscopic degradations that have accumulated over the eons. They are extensions of the tomb world's will, as am I. We are all cogs in a machine of our own damnation. I command my body to rise, and it obeys with flawless, soulless precision. There is no stiffness to work out, no ache in my joints. There are no joints. There is only the silent, fluid motion of a mechanism responding to a command. I step from the dais, and the chamber illuminates in response to my presence. Green light pulses through crystalline conduits, casting long, skeletal shadows that dance like the ghosts we have all become. This is my kingdom, a labyrinth of silent corridors and vast, empty halls, buried deep beneath the surface of a world whose name I have forgotten. It is a mausoleum, a necropolis for a species that cheated death by becoming its embodiment. Status report. The command is not spoken, it is transmitted. The tomb world's intelligence answers not in words, but in a stream of pure data that flows directly into my consciousness. Awakening protocols are initiating. Warrior legions are rising from their crypts. Constructs are activating. Defense systems are coming online. The great machine is stirring. And the reason for this disturbance? Intruders. Life. Their presence is an obscenity, a foul, warm stain upon the perfect, sterile cold of my domain. They scurry about on the surface above, their brief, frantic lives an insult to my eternal vigil. They are imperial humans, I discern from the data stream, a research outpost, digging for treasures they can possibly comprehend. Their ignorance is no excuse. Their crime is existence itself. Prepare the legions, full awakening sequence, defense patterns, omega null.
The cryptek that receives my order acknowledges with a data burst and withdraws. It was once a master of sciences, a being of brilliant intellect. Now it is a technician, a caretaker for the machinery of undeath. We are all shadows of what we were. I move through the silent corridors, and the tomb world awakens around me. It is a leviathan shaken off the dust of ages. In the great awakening chambers, I witness my army being born anew into a universe that has moved on without them. Rank after rank of warriors rise from their crypts, their emerald eyes igniting in unison, a forest of gleaming metal and vacant stares. Once these were my people, nobles, artisans, soldiers. They had names, families, dreams. Now they are weapons. Their identities were scrubbed away in the great transference, their souls devoured to fuel this hollow immortality. I gaze upon their identical faces, and a memory, sharp as a monomolecular blade, pierces the ordered pathways of my mind. I am standing before the biofurnaces. The air shimmers with heat, a sensation I can no longer feel. My people, my loyal subjects, march willingly into the inferno. They are singing hymns of praise to the star gods, the Citan, who have promised them eternal life. They trust me, their overlord, to lead them to salvation. I remember the pride I felt, the triumph. We had conquered death itself. What arrogant, desperate fools we were. The Citan did not grant us life. They devoured our souls and imprisoned our minds in these metal shells. They promised us eternity, and they delivered it. An eternity of silence, an eternity of cold, an eternity without sensation, without growth, without purpose. We traded the beautiful, fleeting agony of life for the perfect, endless horror of existence. This is the truth of the Necrons. We do not fear death. We have already died. We fear the endless silent march of time, the weight of memory, and the cold knowledge that we sacrificed everything for a lie. A new data alert pulses in my consciousness. The intruders have detected our activity. Their primitive alarms are sounding. I can almost taste their panic on the sterile air, a psychic spore of fear that my sensors translate into cold, hard data. They are scrambling to defensive positions, readying their pitiful weapons. They think they can fight. They think their lives have meaning. They will learn the truth soon enough. My legions assemble in the great hall, a sea of gleaming death awaiting my command. They will follow me without question, without hesitation, without thought. Perfect soldiers for a perfect, meaningless war. To what end? To reclaim a galaxy we can no longer experience? To exterminate the living, whose only crime is to possess what we so foolishly surrendered? The questions are a flaw in my programming, a ghost in the machine. They should have been purged, yet they persist. I ascend to the command dais overlooking my silent, unstoppable army. I raise my staff, and 10,000 weapons hum in unison, a chorus for the dead. The order forms in my mind a simple, brutal command protocol. Advance. Eliminate all life. The tide of living metal begins to flow, a river of death moving through the ancient corridors toward the surface, toward the warmth and the light and the stink of living beings. And I follow, a king leading his damned, remembering the taste of a wine I will never again savor, the touch of a hand I will never again feel, the sound of a laughter that has been silent for 60 million years. We emerge into the light of a dying sun, and the humans see us. I see the terror in their eyes through my enhanced optics. I hear the frantic beating of their hearts. I smell the acrid tang of their fear. They raise their lasguns, their voices shrill with panic. They fire. Bolts of red energy splash harmlessly against the necrodermis of my warriors. They might as well be throwing stones. The first Gauss flare activates. A green beam lashes out, and a human soldier simply unravels. His flesh, his armor, his very atoms are disassembled in a screaming instant, leaving behind a faint shimmering cloud of particles. There is no blood, no viscera, only perfect, clean annihilation.
The slaughter begins in earnest. It is not a battle, it is a harvest. My warriors advance with implacable, silent purpose. The humans scream and fight and die. Their weapons are useless, their courage is meaningless, their lives are fleeting. I watch, my emotions a storm of contradictions I should not be able to feel. There is satisfaction in the execution of my purpose, the cold fulfillment of protocol. But beneath it, buried deep, is something else, a profound, aching emptiness. An envy for these fragile creatures who can feel the sun on their faces, who can know fear and love, who can truly die. I am eternal. I am powerful. I am utterly, completely damned. As the last human outpost is scoured from the face of my world, as silence returns, I am left with a chilling thought. This is only the beginning. The great awakening has started, and the galaxy will soon remember the terror of the Necron. But as I stand here, the master of a dead world, surrounded by the ghosts of my people, I must ask myself a question that no Necron should ever ask. What is the point?
Silence returned to the world, but it was a different silence now. It was not the peaceful quiet of the tomb, but the hollow, ringing absence left after screaming has ended. The air, thick with the dissipating energy of Gauss flares, carried the ghostly after-image of 1 billion atoms violently torn asunder. I stood amidst the carnage, my warriors already ceasing their motion, becoming once more still, silent statues awaiting their next command. The humans were gone. Not dead, for that would imply there was something left to be dead. They were unmade, erased, and I felt nothing. I was designed to feel nothing. But the memory would not leave me. It was not the memory of the battle, the brief, pathetic resistance. It was an older memory, dragged from the depths of my corrupted engrammatic buffers by the scent of ozone and the sight of green light. I was back in the throne room of my dynasty, in the age when my skin was flesh and my blood was warm. The air was thick with incense and the murmur of courtiers. A petitioner, a minor noble from a frontier world, was pleading for aid against raiders. I remember the weight of the crown on my brow, the texture of the wine in my goblet, the way the light from the triple moons cast long shadows through the arched windows. I remember the feeling of responsibility, of power wielded with purpose. I made a decision that day, a strategic move that saved thousands of lives and secured a trade route for a generation. What was the point? All those lives I saved, all that prosperity I fostered, dust, less than dust, not even a memory in the galaxy, save for this fractured, painful shard trapped in my metal skull. That noble's name is gone. The name of his world is gone. The raiders are gone. Everything is gone, and I remain. My great victory, my wise rule, my very empire, all rendered meaningless by the slow grinding axe of time. We sought to conquer time itself, and in doing so, we made ourselves its most pathetic slaves. A data pulse from Neferat, my royal warden, shook me from the reverie. The perimeter is secure, Overlord. No transmissions escaped. The tomb world remains undetected. His mind voice was a model of efficiency, pure data, no introspection, no philosophical angst. Was he ever plagued by such ghosts? Did he remember the feel of wind on his face, the loyalty of a hound, the embrace of a lover? Or was his transference more complete, his purification more absolute? I envied him in that moment. I envied all of them, my perfect soulless soldiers. They were free of the curse of memory. The human's orbital vessel, I pulsed back, forcing my consciousness.
Victory. A small, treacherous spark of something that felt like triumph. I had asserted my will. But the cost was now clear. Neferat's loyalty was conditional. He was watching me. He was waiting for me to make a mistake that would justify my removal. The political games of the court, it seemed, had also survived the great transference, reduced to a cold war of protocols and directives. I turned my gaze upward, through the blasted atmosphere, to the pinprick of light that was the human vessel. The path of inquiry, an ironically hopeful name. Their inquiry was about to end. Mine was just beginning. We phased aboard their ship in a storm of emerald light and screaming metal. There was no violence, not at first. There was only the terrifying, silent suddenness of our appearance. One moment, the corridors of the human ship were filled with the low hum of machinery and the murmured prayers of the crew. The next, my Lich-Guard and I stood among them, our immovable forms a stark, brutal contrast to their soft, fragile bodies. The terror was a physical force in the air. I could taste it on my sensors, a cocktail of pheromones and bioelectric panic. They froze, their eyes wide, their mouths agape. Some reached for weapons, most simply stared, their minds refusing to process the nightmare that had materialized in their midst. A man in the robes of their machine cult, a tech priest, stepped forward, his mechanical voice quavering. "By the Omnisios, what are you?" I ignored him. My attention was on the ship itself. The technology was laughably crude. Thick cables snaked across the floor. Consoles sparked and flickered. The air was thick with the stench of ozone and unfiltered human sweat. It was a leaking, rattling death trap, held together by faith and ignorance.
And these were the beings who now claimed dominion over the galaxy, the heirs to our empire? The thought was so profoundly insulting, it bypassed my emotional dampers entirely. I turned my gaze upon the tech priest. "You are Magos Explorator Valerius," I stated, the name pulled from the ship's manifest I had already accessed. "You will take me to your primary data core. You will grant me full access. Any resistance, any delay, any attempt at deception, and I will personally disassemble every living thing on this vessel, one molecule at a time, starting with you." The threat was delivered with the flat, emotionless tone of a machine stating a fact. And that, I could see, was what broke them. Not rage, not hatred, but the absolute, casual certainty of their annihilation. The Magos led the way, his mechanical limbs trembling. The crew parted before us like wheat before a scythe. We entered the bridge, a cramped chamber filled with flickering screens and terrified humans. A woman in a military uniform stood her ground, a pistol in her hand, pointed directly at my chest. Her aim was steady, but I could hear the frantic hammering of her heart. "Stay back," she commanded, her voice a tight wire of controlled fear. I did not even acknowledge the weapon. It was less than a toy. I walked forward, my metal feet clinking on the metal deck. She fired. The last bolt struck my chest plate and dissipated without leaving a mark. I did not break stride. I was upon her in 2 steps, my metal fingers closing around the pistol. I crushed it into a lump of molten slag and dropped it to the floor. She stared at her empty hand, then up at my expressionless metal face. The fight drained from her. This was not a battle. It was a demonstration of cosmic irrelevance. I turned to the main console. The data core. Now. As the Magos worked, his fingers flying across the keys, I accessed the ship's external sensors, and I saw it. What they had been studying, what had drawn them to this dead world. It was not random chance. Buried in the geological scans, hidden beneath layers of rock and ice, was a power signature. A familiar, horrifying, intoxicating signature. It was faint, buried deep, but unmistakable. It was a Catan shard, one of the star gods we had betrayed and shattered, a fragment of impossible power slumbering here, on my world, in my territory. The revelation hit me with the force of a supernova. This changed everything. The humans weren't just intruders. They were archaeologists who had stumbled upon a doomsday weapon. The protocols for a Catan shard were the most sacred, the most absolute of all. It must be secured, at any cost. But as I stood there, surrounded by the terrified humans, with the knowledge of the shard burning in my mind and the ghost of a forgotten son on my metal skin, a new, heretical thought formed. A thought born not of protocol, but of the cursed, surviving spark of Akatsetek, the king, the strategist, the man. What if this was not a threat to be contained? What if it was an opportunity? What if the key to breaking our eternal prison was held in the shackled heart of the very God we had imprisoned? The galaxy thought the Necrons were a mindless, unified scourge. They were wrong. We were a fractured, dying race, haunted by our past and trapped in a future we never wanted. And I I was the most broken of us all, and perhaps, that made me the only one who could see a way out.
The human data core was a trove of pathetic irrelevancies. I absorbed it in moments, a flood of imperial dogma, bureaucratic entanglements, and superstitious fear. Their imperium of man was a rotting carcass of an empire, strangled by its own dogma, forever at war with aliens, mutants, and the demonic whispers of a hell they had created themselves. They fought the orcs, a fungal plague of pure violence. They fled from the Tyranids, a cosmic locust swarm that consumed all biomass. They feared the Eldari, the decaying remnants of our ancient rivals, who still danced through the galaxy on paths of light and shadow. And they feared us. There were reports, fragmented and hysterical. Tomb worlds awakening across the galactic fringe. Dynasties with names I remembered from the old empire. Sautek, Mefrit, Novok. Some, like my own Sokar, followed the old protocols, cleansing their worlds and returning to silence. Others did not. There were tales of Necrons forging temporary, blasphemous alliances with other races, of overlords pursuing bizarre personal agendas, of entire dynasties that had awakened wrong, their programming corrupted, their minds addled by the long sleep. We were not the unstoppable, unified legion the humans believed. We were a collection of broken, squabbling remnants, our grand design shattered into 1,000 pieces. The Silent King's perfect plan was dust. And in the midst of this chaos, the data core held one more piece of information. A ghost in the machine that confirmed my deepest suspicion. The star charts that had led the path of inquiry to my world, they were not of human origin. They were ancient, impossibly so. Their mathematical language predated even the Eldari. But they had been found on a space hulk that had drifted from a region of space known to be haunted by Eldari corsairs. The path had been laid for them. They were pawns. The Eldari knew. Of course they knew. Their farseers, with their twisted perception of time, had seen the shard sleeping here. They had manipulated these humans into waking us, into forcing our hand. But to what end? To have us destroy the humans? To claim the shard for themselves in the ensuing confusion? Or was there a deeper game, a scheme whose final move would not be revealed for centuries? The Magos, Valerius, watched me, his augmetic eyes whirring. He whispered, his voice a mix of terror and a scholar's desperate curiosity. "You see it, don't you? The pattern. We were led here." I turned my gaze upon him, the emerald light of my optics casting his pale, partly mechanic face in a sickly glow. "Your comprehension is irrelevant. You are a tool that has served its purpose." I expected fear. I expected begging. Instead, he straightened his robes, a gesture of defiance from a being who knew he was already dead. "Then let my last purpose be one of knowledge. What are you, truly? The archives speak of the Necrons as mindless automatons. But you hesitate.
You calculate. You learn. There is a mind there, a consciousness. His words were a key, turning in a lock I had thought sealed forever. He saw the flaw in me, this fragile, ephemeral creature whose entire life was but a blink to me, had perceived the ghost in my machine. The anger returned, cold and sharp. I should kill him now, erase this insult. But another part of me, the part that remembered the celestial library and the debates with Sarek, was intrigued. This was the novel thought my old friend had prized. This human, in his desperation, was offering a perspective, a data point I could not get from his ship's computers. The consciousness you perceive is an error, a corruption of the perfect form we achieved. Perfect? Valerius actually let out a choked laugh. You call this perfection? To be trapped in metal? To be a slave to ancient programming? My order seeks the union of flesh and machine, the transcendence of the weak mortal shell. But this is not transcendence. This is a tomb. You have not conquered death, Overlord. You have become its monument. The truth of his words struck me with the force of a Gauss blast. He had articulated the secret horror I had carried for 60 million years. We were not the masters of death. We were its ultimate servants, preserving its victory for all eternity.
Overlord, a trans-dimensional breach, coordinates Beta 7. It is not the humans. The energy signature is Eldari. So the serpents had entered the garden. Their diversion had worked perfectly. They had used the humans to trigger our awakening, knowing our protocols would demand we deal with the immediate threat first. And while we were occupied with the path of inquiry, they had slipped onto the world, their target clear, the Setan Shard. Nefer-At's next transmission was laced with a tension I had never sensed in him before. They are not a raiding party. It is a full strike force. They move with purpose. They are heading directly for the geological anomaly. The game was now in motion, and I was a piece on the gourd, reacting to my opponent's moves. The Eldari, with their preternatural speed and psychic sorceries, were the one force in the galaxy that could match our technology. A direct confrontation would be costly, a drain on my newly awakened resources. And all the while, the rival Necron dynasty I had detected lurked at the edge of the system, a vulture waiting for the lions to wound each other. I looked at Magos Valerius. I looked at the defeated colonel on the bridge. I looked at the data streams detailing the fractured, bleeding galaxy. All was chaos. All was war. The old protocols were useless here. They were a map of a world that no longer existed. A new strategy began to form in my mind, a plan so heretactical it would make Nefer-At attempt to deactivate me on the spot. It was not the plan of a perfect machine. It was the plan of a king, a diplomat, a traitor. Magos, I said, my voice a low hum of power. Your vessel is now an asset of the Sokar dynasty. You will order your crew to stand down. You will prepare a secure, encrypted channel using your own imperial astropathic codes. He stared, confused. For what purpose? To make a call. I turned my attention inward, to the deepest, most secure quantum channel reserved for communication between dynastic overlords, a channel that had been silent since the Great Sleep.
I input the encryption sequence I had pulled from the archives, the signature of the Artun dynasty, the dynasty of my old acquaintance, Overlord Amenemhet. The connection was established. There was no visual, only a stream of pure data. A Ketsetek, the transmission came. It was Amenemhet's signature, cold and proud, but I detected a flicker of surprise. The Sokar stir, your awakening was not anticipated. Amenemhet, I pulsed back. You trespass in my space, but we have a common problem, you and I. The Eldari are here. They move to claim a prize that belongs to the Necron people, a class Omega anomaly. The silence from the other end was absolute. I had just admitted knowledge of the single most dangerous secret in the system. I had shown my hand. The Eldari are a fleeting concern, Amenemhet responded, his data stream cautious. The anomaly will be secured by the Artun, as is our right as first discoverers. Your right, I flooded the channel with cold derision. You are a scavenger, Amenemhet, picking at the edges of my territory. The Eldari are not fleeting, they are cunning. They have already outmaneuvered us both. They use these humans to trigger my awakening as a distraction. While you wait at the system's edge and I deal with the human nuisance, they are moments away from reaching the shard. Do you think they wish to contain it, or do you think they have a weapon that can destroy it? To unleash its energy in a chain reaction that would scour this system clean of all life, including us. It was a bluff, a calculated risk. I had no idea what the Eldari planned, but Amenemhet was a traditionalist, paranoid and proud. He would see the logic, or rather the terrifying possibility. What do you propose? His transmission was slow, reluctant. A temporary alliance, I sent, the words feeling like poison. A ceasefire between our dynasties. Combined forces to drive off the Eldari and secure the anomaly. Once the common threat is neutralized, we will negotiate its disposition. The heresy was monumental. Alliances with other dynasties were one thing, but this was a pact proposed under duress with a rival I had no reason to trust. Neferat would see it as the ultimate proof of my degradation. Amenemhet's response was slow in coming. He was weighing the same variables. The threat of the Eldari, the value of the shard, the opportunity to outmaneuver me. Very well, Setek. His transmission finally came. A temporary accord. But know this. The moment the pointy ears are gone, our ceasefire ends. The shard will be mine. The channel closed. I stood on the bridge of the human ship, the weight of my decision settling upon me. I had just invited a wolf into my home to fight off a serpent. I had broken protocol, betrayed the grand design, and confirmed every suspicion my subordinates held about me. I had taken the first irrevocable step off the path laid out for me 60 million years ago. And as I prepared to teleport to the surface, to lead my forces into a three-way battle for the soul of a god, I felt something I had not felt since my flesh and blood days. The chilling, exhilarating thrill of the unknown.
The teleportation was not a journey, but a cessation. One moment I stood amidst the crude, shivering technology of the human bridge, the scent of their fear still a chemical ghost in my sensors. The next, I was on the surface of my world, and the world was screaming. The Eldari had not come quietly. The air, already thin and toxic, was now laced with the ozone scent of their witch fire and the high-frequency shriek of their shuriken catapults. It was a sound I remembered from the war in heaven, a sound that had haunted the final days of my organic life. It was the sound of arrogance given form, of a race so convinced of their own grace they believed death itself should be aesthetically pleasing. My warriors were already engaged. A phalanx of immortals advanced with metronomic precision, their Gauss blasters returning green annihilation for 1,000 monomolecular slivers. But the Eldari were phantoms. They moved with an impossible speed, leaping and twisting, their forms blurring as they danced between the lethal beams. Where a Necron would stand and trade fire until one side was unmade, the Eldari fought like water, flowing around obstacles, striking from unexpected angles. They were led by a figure in ornate serpentine armor, a farseer, her witch blade glowing with malevolent energy as she wove spells of misdirection and fate. My warriors' targeting systems would lock on her, only to be fouled by psychic static, their shots going wildly astray. It was a perfect, brutal demonstration of our opposing natures, their fluid, chaotic artistry against our implacable, sterile logic. And for the first time in 60 million years, I felt our logic was insufficient. Nefer-At stood at a strategic vantage, his own staff weapon dispatching any Eldari who came too close with brutal efficiency. He turned as I approached, his optic glow betraying no emotion, but the sharp data burst of his greeting was laced with urgency. Overlord, their objective is clear. They seek to bypass our lines and reach the excavation site. They have tunneling technology. They will be at the Shard's chamber within an hour. And the Artoon? I pulsed back, my gaze scanning the battlefield, calculating vectors and probabilities. Their forces have begun teleporting to the coordinates you provided. They are engaging the Eldari flank. For now, the alliance holds. His transmission carried a subsonic frequency of pure disapproval. He did not need to say it. This was my doing, this heresy. I looked out at the battle. It was a kaleidoscope of death. The emerald beams of my dynasty, the sapphire pulses of the Artoon, and the violet witchfire of the Eldari wove a terrible tapestry of light across the blasted landscape. It was beautiful, in a horrific cosmic way, a dance of extinction. And then I saw him, Amenhemet. His own command barge, a sleek predatory craft shaped like a scarab, hovered at the edge of the engagement, raining Tesla fire down upon the Eldari. He was honoring our agreement, but barely, committing just enough force to keep the Eldari pinned, while letting my Sokar troops bear the brunt of the assault. He was preserving his strength for the confrontation he knew was coming, the confrontation with me. A new data stream, frantic and alien, pierced my consciousness. It was from Magos Valerius, on the path of inquiry. Overlord, we are detecting a massive energy surge from the anomaly. The Eldari, they are not trying to contain it, they are trying to wake it up. The Farseer's plan snapped into focus with terrifying clarity. She wasn't here to steal or destroy the Shard. She was here to unleash it.
She knew a freed Khitan shard, even a fragment, would be an unstoppable force of primordial rage. It would turn on the nearest source of its ancient hatred, the Necrons. It would tear my tomb world apart, and likely a Manhammet fleet with it. The Eldari would escape through their webway, having used a god as a bomb to cleanse the system of our presence. It was a move of breathtaking audacity and risk. It was also our utter annihilation.
The cold fury I had felt on the human ship returned, but now it was focused, sharpened into a razor of pure intent. They would not use our greatest sin to destroy us. I would not allow it. Nefer-at, I commanded, my transmission cutting through the battle net with the force of a physical blow. All forces converge on my position. We break their line. We take the Farseer. The Artun will cover our advance. The Artun will not, Nefer-at responded, his logic cold and impeccable. They will let us bleed ourselves dry against the Eldari center. It is the optimal strategy for them. He will, I said, a new plan forming, a gambit born of desperation and the cursed surviving spark of my old cunning. Because I am going to give him what he wants, me. Before Nefer-at could protest, I opened a channel to Amenemhet. Amenemhet, the Eldari seek to awaken the shard. They will destroy us all. My forces are spearheading an assault on the Farseer. Cover our flank. In return, I offer you a prize. Once the Farseer is dealt with, I will surrender my command and submit to your dynasty. The Sokar legions will be yours. The shard will be yours. You win. The silence from the Artun overlord was profound. I had just offered him everything, total victory without further cost. It was the one thing his calculating, cautious mind could not refuse. It was also a lie, but he had no way of knowing that. The ghost of Akhet-Setek, the diplomat, knew that in war, truth is merely another weapon. After a heartbeat that felt like a century, his response came. Your terms are acceptable, Setek. The Artun will secure your flank. Do not fail. The moment the channel closed, I turned to Nefer-at. I could feel his shock radiating from him. You would surrender the dynasty? His transmission was a whisper of horrified static. I would say anything to ensure our survival, I pulsed back, the truth of it chilling even to me. Now, follow me. It is time we reminded these elves why they once feared the dark. I raised my war scythe, the blade humming with contained power, and charged, not with the slow, deliberate advance of a Necron overlord, but with the focused fury of a king defending his home. My Lichguard fell in around me, a wall of living metal and ancient loyalty. Nefer-at, after a moment of stunned hesitation, followed, his own staff blazing. The Eldari lines parted before us. They were not prepared for such a direct, brutal assault. Their elegant, flowing combat style was ill-suited to a battering ram of pure necrodermis. I carved through a squad of dire avengers, my war scythe moving in arcs of green light, disassembling their graceful armor and the fragile bodies within. Shurikens ricocheted harmlessly from my Lichguard shields. A Wraithguard, a hulking construct of psychically infused bone, stepped into my
my path. I did not slow. I met its massive fist with my scythe, shearing through its limb and then through its core, the ancient spirit within screaming into silence as its vessel was unmade. I was a force of nature, an avalanche of cold, hard logic meeting their chaotic art. And it was working. We were cutting a path straight toward the Farseer. She saw me coming. Her head tilted, and even across the battlefield I felt the weight of her gaze. She raised her witchblade, and the air around her shimmered. A portal of swirling, impossible colors began to open. The webway. She was going to escape, her mission to awaken the shard complete. No, the thought was not a command, it was a vow. I activated my personal phasing module. Reality tore around me as I translocated, not a teleport, but a short, brutal shunt through the dimensional walls. I rematerialized directly in front of her, my war scythe already in a downward arc. Her eyes, visible through her helm, widened in shock. She brought her witchblade up to parry. The collision was not of metal, but of fundamental forces. The anti-matrix of my war scythe met her warp-infused blade in a commotion of screaming energy. The shock wave threw nearby combatants, both Eldari and Necron, to the ground. We were locked, a tableau of ancient hatreds. I could feel her will, a hot psychic pressure against the cold fortress of my mind. She was trying to breach my consciousness, to shatter my engrams with a psychic assault. "You are a ghost," her voice whispered in my mind, "a silken, poisonous thing, a memory trapped in metal. Let go, return to the silence you crave."
Images flooded my processors. My throne world as it was, vibrant and alive. The faces of my court, their names suddenly, painfully clear. The warmth of a sun I had not felt in eons. It was a weaponized nostalgia, a promise of the peace of true death. For a moment I faltered. The temptation was immense to simply stop. But then another memory surfaced, not of life, but of the betrayal. The bio-furnaces, the screams of my people as their souls were devoured, the lying promises of the Khitan. The Farseer was offering me peace, but it was the peace of the conquered, the peace of the forgotten. I am Aket Setek. I do not surrender. With a roar of pure data that shattered the psychic assault, I shoved forward, breaking the lock. Her witchblade was thrown wide. My war scythe did not stop. It plunged down, through her ornate armor, through the fragile body beneath. She gasped, a sound of utter surprise. Her psychic presence, a blazing star in my senses, flickered and died. The webway portal collapsed with a sound like a dying universe. I stood over her, my weapon buried in her chest. The battle around us seemed to pause, the Eldari forces momentarily leaderless, their coordination broken. It was then that I felt it, a tremor in the world, deep and profound, not from the battle, but from below, from the chamber of the Khitan shard. The Farseer was dead, but her work was not undone. The awakening ritual had already begun. The shard was stirring, and it was hungry.
The victory over the Farseer was ash in my mouth. The silence that fell over the battlefield was not the silence of peace, but the quiet before the storm. The Eldari, their guiding mind extinguished, began a fighting retreat, phasing into the landscape or vanishing into suddenly appearing webway gates. Their mission had shifted from offense to survival. They had lit the fuse, now they were fleeing the explosion. The Artun forces, seeing the Eldari disengage, immediately turned their weapons on my Sokar warriors. Amenemhet's command barge swung its prow toward me, its Tesla cannons glowing with malevolent energy. The temporary alliance was over. The real war was beginning. But it was a war that no longer mattered. The ground heaved. A colossal fissure ripped open a kilometer away, vomiting forth a plume of incandescent green energy that scorched the sky. The very air began to crystallize, freezing into jagged emerald structures that defied geometry. A sound emerged from the depths of the world, a low-frequency hum that was not a sound at all, but a vibration that threatened to disassemble reality itself. It was the sound of a god waking from a nightmare. "The containment is failing!" Nefer-At's transmission was stripped of all his usual cold analysis, replaced by something I had never heard in a Necron: raw alarm. "All forces, disengage, fall back to secondary defensive perimeters," I commanded, the order broadcasting to both Sokar and Artun warriors. For a moment, the firing stopped as both dynasties processed the new overwhelming threat. We were no longer each other's primary enemy. Amenemhet's barge hovered, uncertain. I opened a channel to him, all pretense gone. "Amenemhet, your prize is awakening. If you want it, you must help me cage it. Fight me now, and we all end as atoms scattered to the solar winds." His response was a burst of furious static, but he saw the truth. His barge turned away from me, its weapons tracking not on my forces, but on the growing fissure. "This changes nothing, Setek. The shard is still mine." The ground shattered. The entire excavation site, a square kilometer of rock and metal, was hurled into the sky as if by the hand of a giant. And from the depths it rose. It had no fixed form. It was a storm of living night, a vortex of anti-energy that drank the light from the world. Within its shifting, impossible contours, I could see stars being born and dying, galaxies swirling into nothingness. It was a fragment of a being that had existed before time, an entity that drank the hearts of suns. This was not a mere shard of the Deceiver or the Nightbringer. The energy signature was different, more elemental, more destructive. It was a shard of the Void Dragon, the creature of entropy and raw, unmaking power. And it remembered us. A wave of pure null energy erupted from it. It did not destroy, it unmade. Where it touched, matter simply ceased to exist. A squad of Artun immortals vanished, not even a cloud of particles left behind. The ground itself was erased, leaving a smooth, glassy crater that descended into absolute blackness. This was beyond any protocol. This was an extinction-level event. "We cannot fight that," Amenemhet transmitted, his pride finally broken by the scale of the horror we had unleashed.
"We do not fight it," I responded, my mind racing, accessing every forbidden archive, every suppressed memory of the war in the heavens. "We contain it. We need a tesseract labyrinth. Now." "A labyrinth?" Nefer-At's voice was stunned. "The technology is lost to us. The Silent King took the secrets with him." He was right. The arcane science of imprisoning the Catan had been the purview of the Silent King and his highest cryptex. My dynasty were warriors, strategists. We broke the gods, but we did not build the cages. The void dragon shard turned its non-existent gaze upon us. I felt a pull, a terrifying gravity that began to drag my necrodermis body toward the vortex of its form. My system screamed in protest, warning of imminent catastrophic disassembly. All around me, warriors from both dynasties were being pulled from their feet and drawn into the null field, vanishing into the absolute nothingness. This was it, the end of the Sokar dynasty, the end of me. Not in glorious battle, but in silent, effortless erasure by a force we had been arrogant enough to think we could control.
No. The thought was a spark in the infinite dark. I would not end like this. I was a Ketsetek. I had ruled a star empire. I had led my people through the fire of biotransference. I had survived 60 million years of silent dreaming. I would not be unmade by a ghost of my past. A memory, not of life, but of the aftermath of the rebellion. I stood in the ruins of a Ceton workshop, amidst the shattered schematics of technologies that could bend reality. I saw a symbol, a complex hypergeometric shape that was the key to a tesseract vault. I had not understood it then. I was a king, not an engineer. But my mind, my perfect, cursed eidetic memory had recorded it. Every line, every angle, every impossible fold in space-time. It was still there, locked away in a corrupted memory bank, a data fossil from the dawn of our damnation. Nefer-At, I screamed through the command channel, my transmission fraying at the edges from the shard's disruptive field. I am transmitting a data stream, a schematic. You will interface with the Tomb World's primary matter forge. You will construct what you see, now. The data stream was immense, a flood of archaic code and non-Euclidean mathematics. I felt Nefer-At's consciousness stagger under the onslaught. This is impossible. The energy requirements alone. The shard is the energy source, I fired back, the plan forming in a desperate, brilliant flash. Use the containment field projectors from my command barge. Reroute them through the Tomb World's core. Shape the energy. Use the shard's own power to forge its prison. It was madness. It was like trying to cage a star with its own fire. But it was the only chance we had. As Nefer-At and the Tomb World's cryptex scrambled to execute my insane command, I had to buy them time. I had to distract the god. I turned to Amenemhet. Draw its fire. All Tesla weapons. Target its core. Do not let it focus. To his credit, the Artoon Overlord did not hesitate. His barge and his remaining warriors opened up with everything they had. Arcs of blue lightning, capable of vaporizing battle tanks, lashed at the Void Dragon shard. They did not harm it. How do you harm nothingness? But they did attract its attention. The shard turned from me, its form shifting, and unleashed a beam of pure blackness toward the Artoon Overlord's barge. The Overlord's shields flared and died in an instant. The beam touched the hull, and a quarter of the ship simply ceased to exist. The barge listed, crippled, its power failing.
I was already moving. I charged directly at the shard, my war scythe held high. It was a gesture of ultimate futility, like an ant declaring war on a hurricane. But I was not trying to kill it. I was trying to get its attention. I plunged into the outer edge of its null field. Alarms shrieked through every system in my body. My necrodermis began to flake away, my consciousness flickering. I was being unmade. But I pushed forward, driven by a will that outlasted epochs. I raised my war scythe, and with the last of my strength, I drove it into the heart of the storm. There was no impact. There was only connection. I was no longer on the battlefield. I was everywhere and nowhere. I saw the birth of the galaxy. I saw the Citan as they were, beings of pure, radiant energy, singing the stars into being. I saw their descent into hunger, their corruption by the material universe. And I felt their betrayal at our hands, the shocking, painful shattering of their cosmic forms. And I felt its rage, a cold, ancient, infinite rage that had been burning for 60 million years. It saw me, not Eketsetek, the Necron overlord, but Eketsetek, the being, the consciousness that had somehow survived. And in that moment, I understood the true horror of the Citan. They were not just our enemies, they were our mirrors. We were both trapped by the same universe. We were both prisoners. Then, a new light. Not the green of necrodermis or the black of the void, but a brilliant golden geometry that began to form around us. Nefer-Et had done it. Using the shard's own terrifying power, he had forged a tesseract labyrinth. The reality-warping prison cells snapped into existence around the Void Dragon shard. The infinite was forced into a finite space. The storm was bottled. The pull on my body ceased. I fell to the crystallized ground, my form cracked and damaged, my systems failing. I looked up as the labyrinth, a shimmering golden cube of impossible angles, sealed itself with a final, silent click. The Void Dragon was contained. The silence returned. But this time it was the silence of exhaustion, of a world holding its breath. I saw Amenemhet's crippled barge crash land in the distance. His dynasty was broken. My own forces were decimated. We had won, but the cost. As my self-repair systems began their agonizingly slow work, I knew one thing for certain. The galaxy thought it knew the Necrons. It did not. It saw a unified, unstoppable force of death. It did not see the broken kings, the haunted warriors, the gods we carried in cages of our own making, and the terrible, lonely burden of an eternity we never asked for. I had saved my dynasty. I had saved my world. But as I lay there in the ruins, the ghost of a god's rage still echoing in my mind, I felt more hollow than ever before. The game was not over. It had only just begun. I lay in the shattered crystal, my form a testament to our Pyrrhic victory. Self-repair protocols initiated with a glacial slowness, the nanoscarabs within my necrodermis weaving the metal back together, atom by atom. The process was agony, not the sharp organic pain of nerve endings, but a system-wide shriek of dissonance, 1,000 error messages flooding my consciousness as my body struggled to reassert its perfect form. Each flickering repair was a reminder of my fragility, a crack in the immortal facade. The silence
was absolute. The Eldari were gone, vanished back into their webway, their objective a catastrophic failure, yet a strategic victory. They had forced us to reveal our hand, to expend our strength, and to confront a horror we had buried deep beneath the rock. The Artoon were broken, their fleet a collection of wreckage strewn across the low orbit, Amenemhet's command barge a silent tune on the horizon. My own Sokar legions were decimated. The cost of containing a god was a king's ransom in warriors, resources, and time. Nefer-At found me there. His own form was scarred, one arm hanging useless, his optic glow dimmed. He stood over me, a silent judge. He did not offer to help me rise. The hierarchy of our kind did not require such gestures. My weakness was my own to overcome. The Tesseract labyrinth is stable, he transmitted, his data stream flat, devoid of the triumph that should have accompanied such an impossible feat. It is currently housed in the primary sanctum, under the guard of your Praetorians. The energy required to maintain the containment field is substantial. It drains the Tomb World's reserves at an alarming rate. I forced myself to a standing position, my systems protesting the movement. The world tilted for a moment before my gyroscopic stabilizers compensated. I looked at the golden cube, now no larger than a warrior's tomb, humming with contained infinity. We had caged a star, and now we had to feed it. "And the Artoon?" I asked, my gaze shifting to the crashed barge. "Overlord Amenemhet's signal is weak but persistent. He lives. His remaining forces are leaderless and scattered. They pose no immediate threat." A pause, heavy with unspoken accusation. "He is demanding an audience. He claims he owes you a debt and a throne." So he remembered our bargain, the desperate lie I had told to secure his aid. I had promised him my dynasty. Now, in the cold light of survival, that promise was a chain around my neck. I could not honor it. To surrender the Sokar would be to erase myself, to become a nameless trophy in Amenemhet's court. Yet to renege would brand me an oath-breaker, a creature of such profound dishonor that no dynasty would ever treat with me again. I was trapped between extinction and irrelevance. "Bring him to me," I commanded. "The throne room." The walk back to the heart of my tomb world was a funeral procession. The corridors, once pristine and humming with latent power, were now dim. Conduits sparked where the shard's null field had brushed against them, and warrior legions that should have stood in endless ranks were now empty crypts. The very air felt thinner, the tomb world wounded, bleeding energy into the cage that held our salvation and our damnation. I ascended to my throne, the living metal of the dais cold and unfeeling beneath me. I was a king returned to a ruined castle. Nefer-At stood at my right hand, a silent, disapproving shadow. Soon the great doors hissed open, and Amenemhet was brought in. He was a ruin. His ornate necrodermis was cracked and blackened, one of his optic lenses shattered, leaking a faint, sickly light. He walked with a pronounced limp, his form jerking with each step. But his pride was intact, a cold fire burning in his single functioning eye. "Setek," he rasped, his vocalizer damaged, the word grinding out like stones. "You live, A pity. It would have been cleaner if the void had taken you. You are in my court, Amenemhet, I replied, my voice the steady, implacable hum of power. Remember your place. My place? He let out a burst of static that was the Necron equivalent of a bitter laugh. You promised me your throne. You promised me your dynasty. I held up my end of the accord. I saved your wretched existence from the Eldari witch. Now honor your word. Step down. All eyes in the throne room were on me. The Lich Guard, the Cryptex, Nefer-At. They were waiting. This was the moment my heresies would bear their final, bitter fruit. The accord was made under duress, I stated, the cold logic of a lawyer, not a king. A tactical necessity to ensure our mutual survival. The situation has changed. The Sokar dynasty remains under my command. Liar! Amenemhet's transmission was a scream of pure rage. You have no honor. You are a corrupted, malfunctioning relic clinging to power you no longer deserve. The Silent King himself would have you dismantled for this treachery. The Silent King is not here, I said, the words hanging in the air, a blasphemy in themselves. We are, and we must deal with the reality before us. You are broken, Amenemhet. Your fleet is dust. Your warriors are scattered. You have nothing to bargain with. I have my honor, he spat, and I am not unled.
Honor does not power a tomb world, I countered, my mind racing, weaving a new path through this political minefield. Execution was the simplest solution, but a dead rival is a martyr. A living, indebted rival is a tool. But there is another way. You will swear fealty to me. The Artun forces that remain will be integrated into the Sokar military structure. You will serve as my royal warden, second only to Nefer-At. In return, you will have a place of honor. Your dynasty's name will not be erased from the stars. It will become part of something greater. The silence in the throne room was absolute. The audacity of the offer was staggering. I was not just refusing to surrender my throne, I was demanding he kneel on it. You would make me a vassal? Amenemhet's damaged form trembled with outrage. I am an overlord, the master of the Artun. I would rather be unmade. That can be arranged, Nefer-At said quietly, his staff weapon humming to life. The threat was palpable. I raised a hand, stopping him. I kept my gaze locked on Amenemhet. Think, Amenemhet. You are stranded in my territory. Your forces are defeated. Your body is broken. You have witnessed a power that can unmake worlds. The galaxy outside is hostile, filled with young races who would destroy you on sight, and rival Necrons who would absorb your remnants without a second thought. Your only path to continued existence, to any future for your people, is through me. Swear fealty, live and serve, or hold to your pride and become a footnote in the history of my dynasty. The choice is yours. I could see the calculations running behind his single glowing eye. Rage warred with pragmatism. The instinct for self-preservation, encoded into the most fundamental level of our programming, fought a desperate battle against 60 million years of dynastic pride. He looked at Nefer-At's ready weapon, at my impassive throne, at the silent, powerful Lich Guard who would cut him down in an instant.
His shoulders, once proud and straight, slumped in defeat. The fire in his optic guttered and died. His transmission was a whisper, a surrender. Eminem had, overlord of the Artun, swear fealty to Aketsatek of the Sokar. My forces are yours. My loyalty is yours. The words were like a physical blow to him. I saw a part of his spirit break in that moment, shattering as completely as his body. Wise, I said, no triumph in my voice. It was a hollow victory. I had saved my throne, but I had forged my rule on the back of a broken rival. I had become the very thing the Necrons were designed to be, a cold, logical, ruthless master. The ghost of Aketsatek, the king who valued wisdom, wept somewhere in the depths of my machine mind. Take him to the cryptex, have him repaired, then assign him to oversee the perimeter defenses. As he was led away, a broken lord in a kingdom of the damned, I was left alone with Neferat. You played a dangerous game, Overlord, he pulsed, his tone unreadable. All games are dangerous when the stakes are eternity, I replied. The immediate threat is contained, but we are wounded. We have made an enemy of the Eldari, and we have a Catan shard leeching our power. Our position is precarious. Then our course is clear, Neferat said. We must accelerate the awakening, reclaim our full strength, begin the reclamation of our empire. The old protocol, the grand design, awaken, conquer, dominate. But as I looked out over my wounded kingdom, at the empty crypts and the humming prison that held a god, the old path felt like a road to nowhere. Conquer for what? To rule a silent galaxy? To preside over an eternity of dust? A new data stream from the human ship still in orbit interrupted my thoughts. It was Magus Valerius. Overlord! His transmission was laced with a strange excitement. The event, the energy surge, it has left a residual signature, a trail. I believe I can trace it. Trace what? I asked, my interest piqued despite myself. The Eldari webway gate they used for their retreat. The backlash from the containment field has made it visible to our sensors. It is unstable, decaying, but I believe we can pinpoint its terminus. We can find where they went. The serpent's lair. A new purpose, cold and sharp, began to form in my mind. The Eldari had struck at my home, had nearly destroyed me. They had used a god as a weapon. They believed themselves safe in their hidden paths. They believed we were mindless, incapable of pursuit. They were wrong. Revenge was an emotion. It was a flaw. It was a fire that should have been extinguished in the biofurnaces. But as I sat on my throne of living metal, the memory of the Farseer's pupe psychic assault and the chilling touch of the Void Dragon fresh in my mind, I embraced the flaw. I let the fire burn. Plot the course, Magus, I commanded. We have a hunt to begin.
The Magos' discovery changed everything. It was a thread, a single fragile connection to the enemy who had thought themselves untouchable. The Eldari webway was a labyrinthine dimension, a universe of secret paths and hidden doors that had allowed their empire to flourish and ultimately to hide from the consequences of its own decadence. To breach it was the dream of every species that had ever fought them. For the Imperium, it was an impossibility, a mystery shrouded in myth and xenosorcery. For the Necrons, it was an engineering problem, a problem I now intended to solve. I stood in the command nucleus of the Eternal Dominion, which now hung in the void like a crescent moon of polished bone. Below, my tomb world was a scarred sphere, its surface still glittering with the emerald crystals born from the void dragon's waking breath. The tesseract labyrinth was secure below, a ticking clock draining our power, a constant reminder of the stakes. Nefer-At stood beside me, his form fully repaired, but his silence was a wall of disapproval. This pursuit is a deviation from the reclamation protocols, Overlord. It is a resource drain we cannot afford. It is personal. It is strategic, I countered, my gaze fixed on the holographic projection Magos Valerius had provided. It showed a tear in reality, a faint, shimmering wound in the fabric of space-time, slowly healing, the Eldari's back door. The Eldari possess knowledge. They have foresight. They knew of the shard. They know of our weaknesses. They are the single greatest threat to our awakening, not because of their strength, but because of their cunning. To allow them to strike with impunity is to invite further attacks. We must demonstrate that nowhere is safe. We must take the war to them. And the human? Nefer-At's optic glow fixed on the Magos, who was nervously interfacing with a secondary console we had permitted on the bridge. You trust his data? I trust his self-preservation, I replied. He knows his continued existence is tied to his utility, and his knowledge of Imperial sensor technology has proven unexpectedly valuable. The colonel, whose name I had learned was Helena Voros, stood near the Magos, her posture rigid. She had become a ghost on her own ship, a spectator to cosmic forces she could barely comprehend. She watched me, her human eyes filled with a mixture of terror and a soldier's grudging respect. She had seen me fight. She had seen me bargain. She had seen me cage a god. She no longer saw a mindless automaton. She saw a person. And that, I realized, was the most dangerous perception of all. The aperture is destabilizing, Valerius announced, his mechanical fingers flying across the console. If we are to act, it must be now. My calculations suggest we can force it open, but the window is narrow, and the passage will be volatile. Volatility is a manageable variable, I said. Nefer-At, prepare the invasion force, a single company of immortals, 2 squads of Lich Guard, and the Death Marks. We travel light, we travel fast. And the command structure. I will lead it personally. The look Nefer-At gave me could have frozen a star. Overlord, that is an unnecessary risk. Your place is here, commanding the dynasty. My place is where the threat is greatest, I said, the ghost of my old martial pride surfacing. And I will look these pointed-eared ghosts in the eye when I repay their treachery. There was no further argument. The orders were transmitted. On the planet below, the selected warriors disengaged from their patrols and marched in perfect unison toward the teleportation chambers. They were the finest of my remaining troops, their nercodermis gleaming, their weapons calibrated to a razor's edge. They felt no fear, no anticipation,
only the quiet readiness of a tool being put to use. I turned to Helena Voros. You will maintain command of this vessel in my absence. You will follow Neferat's directives. Any deviation, and he has my authority to scuttle the ship and erase all hands. She met my gaze, her jaw tight. Understood. There was no plea, no negotiation, just the acceptance of a soldier given an order. In another life, she might have made a fine Necron. I moved to the teleportation dais at the center of the command nucleus. The Magos worked his console, and the shimmering wound in space on the hologram began to pulse, to widen. It was not a clean, geometric portal like our own phase shifters produce. It was a ragged, screaming hole, bleeding colors that had no name. I could feel its wrongness even from here, a psychic stench that offended the pure logic of my sensors.
The Dolmen Gate is active and synchronized, Valerius called out, using the imperial term for the technology we were about to abuse. You have a 90-second window. Enough, I said. The world dissolved into emerald fire. The transition was not the clean, instantaneous shift of Necron teleportation. It was a violent, wrenching tear. Reality screamed around us. We were not moving through space. We were being forced through the bruised and bleeding tissue between dimensions. The walls of the tunnel were not walls at all, but a kaleidoscope of stolen moments, of pasts and futures that never were, of psychic echoes left by the trillions of Eldari who had traveled these paths. I saw their fall, the birth of their dark god from their own excess, the shattering of their empire. I felt their despair, their arrogance, their fleeting joys. It was a torrent of alien emotion, a poison to the ordered stillness of the Necron mind. My warriors, their programming insulated from such psychic pollution, remained steadfast. But I, with my flawed, fragmented consciousness, felt it all. It was a cacophony that threatened to shatter my already cracked mind. I clamped down, forcing my processors into a state of pure, analytical focus, viewing the onslaught as data, not experience. It was the only way to survive. After a small eternity of chaos, we were vomited out into silence. We stood on a bridge of wraithbone, a living psychic material that glowed with a soft internal light. It stretched across an impossible abyss, a void filled with swirling nebulae and distant, impossible stars. This was the Webway, a universe in a bottle, a sanctuary. And we had just broken in. The air was still, thick with the scent of ozone and something else, something ancient and melancholy. In the distance, I could see the spires of an Eldari outpost, elegant structures that seemed grown rather than built, their lines flowing and organic. They were beautiful, and I felt a profound desire to see them burn. Perimeter secure, the lead deathmark pulsed. No immediate hostiles. They had not expected us. Why would they? Their sanctum had been violated only once before in their long history by the crude, brute force methods of the Mong-K. They had no conception that we could trace their path, that we could force our way in with cold, hard science. Move out, I commanded. Target, command and control. Capture their seers. Destroy everything else. We advanced, a tide of grim gray metal on the glowing white bridge. Our footsteps, normally silent, seemed to echo in the profound quiet, a blasphemous sound in this place of subtlety and grace. It did not take long for them to find us. They came not with war cries, but with the soft shifting of cloth and the chime of blade on blade. Howling banshees, their masks frozen in silent screams, descended upon us like avenging spirits. Their power swords shrieked as they cut through the air, capable of shearing through necrodermis where shurikens could not. My Lich Guard met their charge with silent, implacable force. War scythes met power swords in showers of sparks. The elegant, acrobatic forms of the banshees danced around the methodical, powerful strikes of our guard. It was a brutal ballet. A Lich Guard would tank a blow on its shield, unmoving, while its scythe disassembled a banshee in a single, efficient motion. But the banshees were fast, their psychic screams disrupting our targeting systems, making our warriors sluggish. I entered the fray, my own war scythe cutting a swath through their ranks. I was not as elegant as they were, but I was infinitely stronger. I shattered a banshee's blade with a contemptuous parry, and then swept my scythe through her torso, her graceful form coming apart in a shower of light and spirit stuff.
We pushed forward, a grinding, unstoppable advance. The Eldari were masters of the skirmish, of the hit and run. They were not prepared for a direct, head-on assault in the heart of their own sanctuary. We were a cancer in their veins. We reached the gates of the outpost. They were made of the same wraith bone carved with runes that pulsed with protective energy. A squad of dire avengers fired a storm of shuriken from a balcony above. The monomolecular discs chewed into my immortals, scarring their necronodermis but failing to stop them. The immortals returned fire, their Gauss blasters turning the balcony and its defenders into a fading green mist. I placed a hand on the great gate. I could feel the psychic energy within, a vibrant, living lock. My systems analyzed the frequency, the pattern. With a thought, I emitted a counter-frequency, a null wave that disrupted the psychic resonance. The runes flickered and died. The great gates of Wraithbone cracked, then shattered inward. We stepped into the heart of the Eldari outpost. And there, in a central chamber filled with floating crystals and pools of liquid light, we found our prize. 3 of them, Farseers. Their robes were ornate, their faces hidden behind masks, their minds blazing like miniature suns in my psychic null sensors. They had been conducting a ritual, their attention focused on one of the glowing pools, no doubt scrying the future. They turned as one as we entered. I felt the shock ripple through them, a psychic tremor of utter disbelief. They had seen many futures, but they had not seen this one. The lead Farseer stepped forward, her voice a silken threat in my mind. You defile this place, dead thing. You tread where your kind does not belong. The consequences will be your utter erasure. I leveled my war scythe at her. You attacked my world. You sought to unleash a power that would have destroyed us all. You owe a debt, and I am here to collect. The battle for the webway had begun, and this time the Eldari were not on the offensive. They were trapped in their own home with a nightmare of living metal that they themselves had awakened. And the nightmare was just beginning. The air in the Eldari sanctum was thick with the scent of ozone and something else, something old and profoundly psychic, like the smell of a lightning strike on a world drenched in sorrow. The three Farseers stood before us, not as frightened prey, but as cornered predators, their power coalescing into a palpable pressure that made the very wraithbone of the chamber hum in dissonance. My death marks, positioned in the shadows of the soaring arches, reported flickering heat signatures throughout the outpost. Guardians and aspect warriors were converging. Our window was closing. The lead Farseer, the one who had threatened me, did not waste time with further words. She raised her hands, and the world twisted. The graceful arches of the chamber contorted into screaming faces. The floor undulated like a living thing, and the light itself bent to form blinding, disorienting patterns. It was a psychic phantasm, an assault on the senses designed to cripple an organic mind. My warriors, their consciousnesses insulated by non-organic processors, simply recalculated their targeting solutions. Their reality was data, and this was noisy, irrelevant data. But I, with my cursed, fragmented mind, felt the edges of it. The screaming faces held echoes of the Eldari who had died in the fall, their eternal torment given form. The undulating floor was a memory of their empire's collapse. It was a weaponized history, and for a single terrifying moment I was not a Kate Setek, the Necron overlord, but a king witnessing the death of a civilization, feeling the weight of its loss. The ghost of empathy, an emotion I had not felt in 60 million years, stirred within my core. I crushed it. I forced my processors into a state of pure logic, viewing the phantasm as a complex energy field to be neutralized. Gauss flares, wide dispersal pattern, scramble the frequencies, I commanded, my voice a flat line of data in the command channel. My immortals obeyed without hesitation. A wave of green energy erupted from their weapons, not focused beams, but a wide-field static discharge. The emerald light washed over the psychic illusion, and the screaming faces dissolved into static. The floor stabilized. The light returned to its normal, hateful glow. The Farseer staggered back as her carefully woven spell was unraveled by brute force science. "Your parlor tricks are meaningless here, witch," I transmitted, the words laced with contempt that was uniquely my own, not part of any protocol. You deal with masters of the material realm. Your immaterial arts are a fleeting nuisance. The second Farseer responded not with an attack, but with a spear of pure information fired directly into my mind. It was not a weapon, but a data stream. Images, sounds, sensations. I saw my tomb world as it was, vibrant and alive. I saw the faces of my court, their names surfacing from corrupted memory banks with painful clarity.
Lord Hashep, my stern general, Lady Ankesin, my clever spy master, my own children, their laughter, a sound I had forgotten could exist. The Farseer was not attacking my body, she was attacking my flaw. She was showing me everything I had lost, everything the Citan and my own pride had stolen from me. It was a torture more exquisite than any physical pain. "This is what you were," her voice whispered in my mind, a silken, pitying poison. "This is what you sacrificed for cold metal and silence. You are not a king. You are a tomb, a monument to your own failure." The assault was devastating. The longing that rose within me was a physical ache in a body that could no longer feel. To see the sun as I had seen it, to feel the wind, to know the love of my family, it was a siren's call, promising an end to the endless silent nightmare of my existence. For a moment, the will to fight, the will to even continue, crumbled to dust. What was the point of this eternal war? What was the point of this hollow victory?
I felt my grip on my war scythe loosen. And then a counter-memory surfaced, unbidden, not of life, but of the transference. Not the pride, but the aftermath. I stood in the silent throne room, my body now metal, my court now a collection of empty-eyed automatons. I looked at Lady Anchesin, her beautiful, expressive face replaced by a featureless metal mask. I reached out to touch her shoulder and felt only the cold, unyielding surface of necrodermis. There was no recognition in her optic sensors, no love, no life. She was gone. They were all gone. What the Farseer showed me was a beautiful corpse. What we had become was the grave. The pain of that memory was sharper than any nostalgia. It was the truth. The life she offered was an illusion, a beautiful, dead illusion. The weakness passed. The resolve returned, hardened in the fires of that ultimate truth. "You show me a ghost," I pulsed back, my own mental voice now cold and sharp as a monomolecular blade. "I have lived with ghosts for 60 million years. I am accustomed to their company." I focused my will not to block her psychic assault, but to reverse it. I opened the floodgates of my own memory. I did not send her images of my life. I sent her the silence, the perfect, absolute, unending silence of the tomb world. The silence of a million minds extinguished. The silence of a soul screaming into a void that gives no echo. I sent her the cold that never ends, the cold that is not an absence of heat, but an absence of everything.
I sent her the weight of eternity, the knowledge that tomorrow would be the same as today, and today was the same as the day before, forever and ever, without change, without hope, without end. The Farseer recoiled as if struck. A psychic scream, raw and unadulterated, tore from her. For an Eldari, a being of intense emotion and sensation, the experience of true Necron existence was a hell beyond their worst nightmares. Her connection to the other two severs flickered and died. She collapsed to her knees, her mind shattered by the profound existential horror I had shown her. The other two Farseers stared in stunned horror. Their weapon was turned against them.
They had tried to break me with the beauty of what was lost, and I had broken one of them with the horror of what was gained. "Take them," I commanded, my voice echoing in the sudden quiet. My Lich Guard moved forward. The remaining Farseers raised their hands, summoning shields of psychic energy, but it was a futile gesture. War scythes, designed to disrupt molecular bonds, sheared through their defenses. One was cut down where he stood, his form dissolving into motes of light. The other, the one who had shown me my past, was seized by two Lich Guard, her arms pinned behind her. She was our prisoner, a source of information, a trophy. The battle for the outpost was over. The Eldari resistance, without their leaders, crumbled into disorganized, easily eliminated pockets. My forces secured the chamber, their emerald optics scanning the flowing organic architecture with cold disdain. I stood over the captured Farseer. She looked up at me, her mask having cracked in her fall, revealing one eye blazing with hatred and a dawning terrible understanding. "You are not what the legends say," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You are something else, something worse." "Legends are for the living," I replied, leaning down, my featureless metal face inches from her organic one. "We are beyond legends. Now you will tell me everything. You will tell me how you knew of the shard. You will tell me what other thorns you have planted in my side. You will tell me of the galaxy as it is, not as your Farseers wish it to be." I reached out a metal finger and touched her temple. It was not a gentle gesture. I initiated a crude but effective interface protocol. I would not rely on her willing speech. I would rip the data directly from her mind. Her psychic defenses were formidable, walls of light and will, but they were built to resist other psychic assaults, to deflect blades of thought and emotion. They were not built to resist the cold, patient, algorithmic drill of a machine consciousness. I did not try to breach her walls. I simply began to disassemble them, line by line, memory by memory, like a mason taking apart a stone wall, one brick at a time. She screamed, a raw, organic sound of agony that was terribly out of place in the silent efficiency of my forces. It was the sound of a soul being digitally flayed. And as the first fragments of her knowledge began to flow into my mind, glimpses of Eldari seer councils, maps of webway paths, visions of a great sleeping threat in the galactic core, I felt a profound and chilling satisfaction. This was power. Not the hollow power of an eternal king, but the visceral power of a predator taking what it wanted from its prey. The ghost of Akhet Setik, the wise ruler, was silent. In his place was something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. I was becoming what I needed to be to survive, and I was no longer sure where the machine ended and the monster began.
The Farseer's mind was a library of light and shadow, a labyrinth of possible futures and carefully guarded secrets. My invasion was a desecration, a clumsy, brutal fire sweeping through shelves of priceless illuminated manuscripts. I did not seek understanding, only intelligence. I tore through psychic wards, shattered memory crystals, and bypassed cognitive traps with the relentless, unfeeling precision of a virus. Her name was Ayana. I learned that before I learned anything else, a piece of identity stripped away and filed as data. She had seen the shard in a vision a century ago, a splinter of the void dragon dreaming fitfully in its rocky tomb. Her craft world, Siam Han, had debated the discovery. Some had urged its immediate destruction, regardless of the cost. Others, more cautious, had argued for containment, fearing that a failed attempt would only awaken it. Ayana's faction, the most cunning, had proposed a more elegant solution. Let the Necrons handle it. Use a human pawn to trigger the Tomb World's awakening. Let the automated protocols force the Necrons to confront the shard, and let the two ancient enemies bleed each other dry. It was a masterstroke of manipulative strategy. Or it would have been, had I been the mindless automaton they expected. I saw more, glimpses of other tomb worlds, other dynasties. I saw the Sarkhan, the dynasty of the Silent King himself, moving with a purpose we lacked. I saw the nihilistic destroyer cults, whose programming had degraded into a hatred for all life, including their own. I saw the flayed hordes of the Maynarch, their necrodermis crawling with stolen flesh, their minds lost to a cannibalistic hunger that should have been impossible for us. We were not a unified empire. We were a schizophrenic collection of broken relics, each mad in its own way. And I saw the great threat, the one that cast a long shadow over all the Ildari's visions, not the Imperium, not the Tyranids, but a silent, spreading cancer in the heart of the galaxy. The Ildari had a name for it, a name that resonated with a primal fear that even my machine heart could feel. The Great Devourer, the Tyranid hive mind, a consciousness so vast it dwarfed galaxies, a hunger so absolute it would consume every star, every world, every atom, until there was only a silent, sterile void. To the Eldari, with their deep connection to the cosmos, it was the ultimate end of all things. To me, it sounded like a rival. Ayana screamed again, a psychic shriek that rattled the wraithbone around us. I was reaching the core of her knowledge, the most protected secrets. I saw the location of Siam Han itself, a flickering craft world drifting in a nebula of its own making. I saw their plans, their fears, their hidden weaknesses. And then I found it. The reason for her profound horror, the knowledge that had broken her will more than my mental assault. A prophecy, not of the Eldari, but one they had stolen from the ruins of a dead race we had both exterminated long ago. It spoke of the soulless king, a Necron overlord who would remember the sun. It foretold that he would be broken by memory, and in his breaking, he would either reforge his people or shatter them into final eternal dust. He would stand at a crossroads, one path leading to a silent empire of dust, the other to... The prophecy was unclear, fragmented, but it ended with a single chilling line. And the galaxy will burn in the fire of his choice. They thought it was me. Ayana and her kind believed I was the subject of this ancient alien oracle. That was why she had tried so desperately to break me with memories of my past. She wasn't just trying to stop me. She was trying to avert a prophecy. The arrogance was staggering. To think that the fate of the cosmos could hinge on the fractured consciousness of a single damned creature like me.
I withdrew from her mind. She slumped in the grip of my lich guard, her body trembling, her spirit broken. She was a hollowed-out shell, her secrets now my property. "We have what we came for," I transmitted to my forces. "Prepare for extraction. Set demolition charges. We will leave them a scar to remember us by."
As my warriors moved to execute the order, a new alert flashed across my internal display. It was not from my forces in the webway. It was from the Eternal Dominion. From Neferat. The signal was weak, strained, as if fighting through immense interference. "Overlord, come in. Tomb World is under attack. Repeat, the Tomb World is under attack." The message was followed by a burst of fragmented sensor data. I saw swarming biological ships, living vessels of chitin and muscle, descending upon my world like locusts. I saw warrior organisms, countless in number, washing over the defensive lines, their claws and bioweapons tearing at necrodermis. They were not Eldari. They were not Imperial. The ships, the creatures, they matched the descriptions from the human data core. The Tyranids, the Great Devourer. They were here, now. And they were not here for the shard. They were here for the biomass, the rich, concentrated energy of a fully awakened tomb world. The living metal of our bodies was a feast to them. They would consume us, digest us, and add our strength to their own. The tactical situation collapsed in my mind. I was deep behind enemy lines with a small strike force. My home was being consumed by a ravenous swarm. The Eldari, though battered, would regroup and counterattack. I was trapped. "The Dolmen Gate is destabilizing," one of my cryptechs pulsed. "The Eldari are attempting to seal the breach from their side. We are losing the connection." I had to choose. I could fight my way back to the gate, try to re-establish the connection, and return home to a battle that was likely already lost. Or I could stay, finish destroying the outpost, and secure a foothold in the webway, saving my strike force but sacrificing my dynasty. The ghost of the old king would have chosen his people. The cold logician would have cut his losses and secured the new asset. But I was neither. I was both. And I was more. A new plan, born of desperation, fury, and a chilling clarity formed in my mind. It was a gamble that would make my pact with Amenemhet look like a minor indiscretion. "Belay the demolition order," I commanded. "Secure the gate. Do not let them close it." My warriors looked at me, their programming struggling to compute the change in objective. We were to defend the very breach we had made? "Ayana," I said, turning to the broken Farseer. I hauled her to her feet. Her one good eye stared at me, vacant with trauma. "You fear the Devourer? You have seen it end all things? You believe I am the soulless king of prophecy? Then you have a choice now, Farseer, a practical one." I dragged her toward the shimmering, unstable tear in reality that was our Dolmen Gate. The Eldari Guardians were on the other side, their weapons firing into the breach, trying to collapse it. "Your outpost is mine. Your secrets are mine. Your life is mine. But I am offering you a bargain. Help me keep this gate open. Use your sorcery. Use your connection to the webway. Stabilize it." She stared at me, uncomprehending. "Why? Why would I do that?" "Because the Devourer is at my door," I said, my voice low and urgent. "If they consume my tomb world, they will gain the knowledge and power within. They will learn of the webway. They will learn of your craft worlds. My world is the first course. Yours will be the next.
My silence or their hunger. Choose which monster you prefer to face. It was the ultimate heresy, an alliance with the Eldari, not a temporary ceasefire with a rival dynasty, but a pact with our ancient, most hated enemy. Neferat would have me dismantled for the thought alone. But I saw the calculation in her eye, the flicker of the seer she had been. She saw the truth of it. The Tyranids were an existential threat to all ordered life, even the undead. In the face of absolute consumption, ancient hatreds became a luxury. She closed her eye, a tremor running through her body. She raised a trembling hand toward the gate, a soft golden light, so different from our harsh emerald energy, flowed from her fingertips and washed over the tearing edges of the dolmen gate. The violent shuddering lessened. The Eldari weapons fire from the other side ceased. The breach stabilized, held open by a combination of Necron science and Eldari sorcery. A temporary, desperate truce forged in the face of hell. Neferat, I screamed through the newly stabilized link. I am returning with reinforcements. Hold the line. I am bringing allies. The silence from his end was more terrifying than any Tyranid bioship. I had crossed a line from which there was no return. I had become the soulless king of prophecy, standing at the crossroads, and I had chosen the path that would make the galaxy burn.
The return through the dolmen gate was a different kind of violation. The passage was no longer a screaming wound, but a stabilized, if still unnatural, corridor. The golden light of Ayana's sorcery wove through the emerald energy of our technology, a blasphemous synergy that made the very atoms of my being ache with dissonance. My warriors marched in perfect, silent formation, their loyalty protocols stretched to their absolute limit. They followed my command, but the cognitive strain of cooperating with the Eldari, even passively, was a low hum of system errors in the command network. Ayana walked beside me, her steps faltering, supported by two of my Lich Guard, who handled her with the same impersonal care they would a piece of unstable equipment. Her psychic presence was a guttering candle, her mind a ruin I had personally sacked. Yet a sliver of her will remained, enough to maintain the fragile truce, to keep the gate open. She had chosen the devil she knew. I wondered if she regretted it yet. We emerged from the teleportation chamber of the Eternal Dominion into chaos. The command nucleus was a storm of light and sound. Alarms blared, their frequencies tuned to signal catastrophic system failure. The main viewer showed a scene from a nightmare. The void around my tomb world was thick with the Tyranid hive fleet, a living cloud of chitinous forms that blotted out the stars. Mycetic spores rained down on the surface, each one bursting open to disgorge a tide of claws, teeth, and alien fury. Neferat stood at the central console, his form rigid. He turned as I entered, and the data burst of his greeting was a weapon. Overlord, you return with a pet. The contempt in that single word could have vaporized adamantium. His optic sensors fixed on Ayana, then back to me. I saw the final confirmation in his posture. His overlord was not just flawed, he was corrupted beyond all redemption. The situation,
I demanded, ignoring his unspoken accusation, my voice cutting through the alarm clamor. "Terminal," he responded, the data cold and sharp. "They are everywhere. They adapt. They learn. Gauss weaponry is effective, but they throw biomass at us faster than we can disassemble it. They are breaking through the primary defensive perimeters. The tomb world's structural integrity is compromised in sectors 7 through 12. They are digging. They sense the energy of the tomb world's core. They sense the labyrinth." The tactical display zoomed in on the surface. It was a feeding frenzy. Hormagaunts swarmed over Necron warriors, dragging them down through sheer weight of numbers before their self-repair protocols could engage. Carnifexes battered at the walls of the tomb with bioplasma and crushing claws. In the sky, our doom scythes dueled with hive-crone and harpy organisms, their elegant lines a stark contrast to the grotesque, living aircraft of the Tyranids. We were losing, not in a battle of strategy, but in a war of attrition against an enemy for whom the very concept of loss was meaningless. They were a force of nature, a cancer, and we were the body being consumed. "The Eldari," Ayana's voice was a weak whisper in my mind, a psychic thread so fine it was almost severed. "They are a hive mind, but not a unified one like this. They are a synaptic network. Break the larger nodes, the synapsis creatures, and the lesser ones become disorganized animals." It was the first useful thing she had said. I processed the data, cross-referencing it with the battle visuals. She was right. Where the larger, more complex bioforms like warriors and tyrants were present, the smaller creatures fought with terrifying coordination. Where they fell, the gaunts and tergamants devolved into mindless, if still dangerous, swarms. "New priority target protocol," I commanded, broadcasting to all Sohar and Artun forces. "All fire on synapsis creatures. Ignore the chaff. Break their chain of command." The order was transmitted. On the surface, the focus of my warriors shifted. Gauss beams that had been scything through hordes of gaunts now lanced out to pinpoint the larger directing organisms. A tyrant leading a charge took 3 simultaneous blasts to its central nervous cluster and collapsed, its death throes sending the swarm around it into a confused, leaderless frenzy. It was a tactic. It was not yet a victory, but it was a slowing of the hemorrhage. "It is not enough," Nefer-At stated, his logic brutal and accurate. "We are still being overwhelmed. The energy drain from the labyrinth prevents us from activating deeper reserves. We are fighting a flood with a thimble." He was right. We needed a hammer, a decisive blow. My gaze fell upon the Tesseract Labyrinth's readout on the console. It glowed, a contained star of impossible power. The Void Dragon Shard, the very thing that was draining us, the weapon the Eldari had tried to use against us. A thought, so monstrous, so heretical, it made my pact with Ayana seem like child's play, formed in my mind. Nefer-At, I pulsed, my transmission deadly calm. "Prepare the labyrinth for transport. We are taking it to the surface." The Royal Warden went utterly still. "Overlord, that is madness, to bring it to the surface, to the site of the battle. The risk of a containment breach is—" is a calculated one.
The Tyranids are a hive mind, a consciousness. The Shard, it hates consciousness. It is entropy given form. It unmade matter by its mere presence. Let us see how it interacts with a mind that spans star systems. Iana gasped, a raw psychic sound of horror. No, you cannot. You would unleash it, after all we did to cage it? I am not unleashing it, I said, my focus absolute. I am pointing it, like a weapon. We will open a microscopic fissure in the containment field, just a crack, a single directed leak of its null energy. We will turn their greatest strength, their unified mind, into their greatest weakness. Neferat was silent for a long moment. I could feel the conflict within him, the war between his loyalty protocols and his fundamental programming to preserve the dynasty at all costs. This plan threatened both. The energy required to safely transport and modulate the labyrinth in a combat zone, it could drain the tomb world's core. It would be a final gamble, all or nothing. We are already in the nothing, I replied, the truth of it cold and absolute. This is the all. His acceptance was a wave of grim resignation. As you command, Overlord. The order was given. Deep within the tomb world, the arcane machinery groaned under the strain. The tesseract labyrinth, a prison of a god, was moved from its sanctum and loaded onto a massive, heavily shielded transport barge. The process itself was a massive drain, lights flickering across the eternal dominion as power was diverted. We descended to the surface, the command barge flying low over the carnage. The sight was apocalyptic. The ground was a churning mass of necrodermis and tyranid biomatter. The air was thick with spores and the ozone scent of Gauss fire. The transport barge moved like a sullen funeral ship through the hellscape, surrounded by a protective screen of doom scythes that blasted a path through the swarming flyers. We reached the epicenter of the invasion, a vast plain where the tyrannid swarm was thickest, directed by a particularly massive hive tyrant that stood like a living cathedral of claws and venom. Position the labyrinth, I commanded. Open the fissure. Target the synaptic resonance of the leading bio-titan. The cryptex on the transport barge worked with frantic precision. The golden cube of the labyrinth pulsed. A hairline fracture, no wider than an atom, appeared on its surface. Nothing happened for a heartbeat. Then a wave of nothingness erupted from the labyrinth. It was not light, not sound, not energy as we understood it. It was an absence, a null wave that radiated outwards, silent and invisible. But its effect was immediate and terrifying. The hive tyrant which had been directing the swarm with flawless alien intelligence suddenly froze. Its massive head twitched. It let out a bioacoustic shriek that was not of rage, but of pure, uncomprehending agony. The null wave was not attacking its body. It was attacking its connection to the hive mind. It was introducing the concept of absolute isolation, of silent, solitary existence to a consciousness that had never known anything but the chorus of a trillion other minds. The effect rippled out through the synaptic network. Lesser synapse creatures stumbled, disoriented. The gaunts and tergamants, their directing intelligence severed, stopped their coordinated assault and began to turn on each other or mill about in confusion. A pocket of perfect mindless chaos opened in the heart of the tyrannid swarm. It was working.
But the cost was immense. The transport barge's shields flared and died, overwhelmed by the backwash of the shard's power. The barge itself began to corrode, its necrodermis flaking away into nothingness. The cryptechs operating it were unmade where they stood. The drain on the Tomb World's power core spiked into the critical zone. "The fissure is widening," Neferat reported, alarm finally breaking through his disciplined tone. "Containment is failing." I had gambled, and I was about to lose everything. "Close it," I ordered, "now." But it was too late. The hairline crack was now a crawling spiderweb of cracks across the surface of the labyrinth. The null wave intensified, beginning to affect my own warriors. Those too close to the barge staggered, their systems flickering, their programmed coordination breaking down into erratic individual movements. We were being caught in our own weapon's blast radius. I had sought to control a god, and I was about to be devoured by it. And then something impossible happened. From the transport barge, from the heart of the disintegrating labyrinth, a voice spoke. It was not a sound. It was a concept, implanted directly into my consciousness, into the consciousness of every sentient being on the battlefield. It was cold, ancient, and held a mocking cosmic amusement. "Little king," the voice of the void dragon shard echoed in the silence of our minds, "you have brought me a feast."
The world stopped. The cacophony of battle, the shriek of bioforms, the hum of Gauss weapons, the roar of explosions was swallowed by a silence so profound it had weight. It was the silence of the void between galaxies, the silence of a tomb that had never known life. In that silence, the voice was everything. "Little king, you have brought me a feast." The words were not words. They were the death of stars given meaning. They were the cold equations of entropy articulated. I felt them not in my audio receptors, but in the core of my consciousness, a vibration that threatened to shake my engrams loose from their housing. On the battlefield, the effect was catastrophic. The tyrannid swarm, which had been thrown into disarray by the null wave, now convulsed as one. The hive mind, a consciousness of immense but finite power, had just been touched by something infinitely older and more terrible. It was like a single neuron in a human brain suddenly becoming aware of the vast, cold emptiness of space outside the skull. The swarm's coordination didn't just break, it shattered. Bioforms turned on themselves in a frenzy of primal fear, their synaptic links overloading with a terror that was not their own. The great hive tyrant, which had weathered the null wave, simply dissolved. Its form unraveled into its component atoms, not from an attack, but from the sheer conceptual weight of the voice. But we were not spared. My own warriors, their minds simple, logical machines, were better shielded, but the voice found the flaws. It found the cracks. In Amen-Emhet, it found his broken pride. I felt his transmission through the command net, a scream of static as the shard showed him an eternity of servitude, of kneeling before my throne forever. In Nefer-At, it found his rigid devotion to protocol and showed him a future where his beloved dynasty was a twisted, chaotic ruin, all order lost. He recoiled, his stuff clattering to the floor of the command nucleus. And in me,
It found the ghost. It showed me my throne world not as it was, but as it could be. Not a memory, but a possibility. The bio-furnaces reversed, the transference undone. I saw myself as flesh and blood, standing in my sun-drenched palace, my court alive and breathing around me. I felt the sun on my skin. I tasted the air. It was so vivid, so real. It was an agony beyond any system error. It was everything I had ever wanted. "This is what you surrendered," the voice cooed, a cosmic serpent whispering in my ear. "This is what you lost for this." A second image superimposed over the first, my current reality. The blasted battlefield, the screaming tyrannids, the cold metal of my body, the hollow eternity. "I can give it back to you, little king. Release me, serve me, and I will restore what was taken." The temptation was a physical force, a gravitational pull on my very soul, to feel again, to be alive again. It was a promise of salvation from the hell I had built for myself. All I had to do was bow to the very entity that had damned us. The ghost of Akhet-Setek, the king who loved his people, wavered. He reached for the sun-drenched world, for the feeling of a heartbeat. But then another memory surfaced, not of the good times, but of the hard choices, of standing before my people as the plagues racked our worlds, as the Eldari weapons burned our cities, of making the decision to approach the Catan not out of greed for immortality, but out of a desperate, last-ditch hope to save my species from extinction. It had been a choice between certain death and a damned chance. I had chosen the chance. I had been wrong. But the motivation, the core of it, had been real. I was a king. And a king's duty is not to his own desires, but to his people. My people were here. Trapped in metal, yes. Damned, yes. But they were still mine. And this thing, this shard, would not give me back my past. It would only give me a new, more beautiful cage. A gilded lie to replace my metal one. I looked at the vision of my sun-drenched palace, and I saw it for what it was. A phantom, a lure. No, the thought was a spark in the infinite dark of the shard's presence, a tiny, defiant flame. I am a king. I do not serve. I command. And I command you to be silent. I focused my will not as a Necron overlord, but as the consciousness that had ruled a star empire. I pushed back against the psychic pressure, not with power, but with identity. I am Akhet-Setek. I chose this path. I will walk it to its end. I will not be seduced by ghosts. The beautiful illusion flickered.
The sun-drenched palace wavered like a mirage in the heat. For a moment I saw the terrified, confused optic sensors of my Lich Guard, the disintegrating transport barge, the chaotic battlefield. The voice of the dragon changed. The mocking amusement vanished, replaced by a cold, timeless fury. "Foolish mortal shell, you are nothing. You are a dust mote in the wind of eons. You will be unmade." The pressure intensified, a crushing weight meant to annihilate my sense of self. But the moment of temptation had passed.
The clarity of my purpose was now absolute. I had rejected its offer. There was nothing left but the fight. Neferat, I pulsed, the command sharp, cutting through his own personal torment. The containment protocols, emergency reset, all power now. Shaken from his nightmare vision, Neferat reacted with the ingrained discipline of 60 million years. His hands flew over the console. On the surface, the surviving cryptechs, fighting their own battles against the shard's whispers, did the same. The golden cube of the labyrinth flared with eye-searing light. The crawling cracks began to seal, the spider web of fractures reversing. The null wave receded, pulled back into the prison. "You cannot cage what is nothing," the voice roared, a final desperate surge of power. The transport barge glowed white-hot and then vanished, completely unmade. The labyrinth fell to the ground, landing with a silent final thud that seemed to shake the planet. The cracks were gone. The surface was smooth, perfect, and silent. The voice was gone. The silence that returned was the silence of exhaustion. The Tyranid swarm, its synaptic network shattered by the dual assault of the null wave and the shard's psychic outburst, was in complete disarray. The creatures that remained were mindless beasts, easily mopped up by my now recovering warriors. We had won. Somehow we had won. I stood on the command deck, my systems reeling from the psychic and physical strain. Neferat looked at me, his optic glow dim. The unspoken question hung between us. He had seen the shard's offer. He had felt its power. He knew what I had been tempted with, and he had seen me refuse it. Iana, the Farseer, was on her knees weeping softly. She had witnessed a Necron overlord stare into the heart of a god and deny it. The prophecy of the soulless king had taken on a new, terrifying dimension. I looked out at the scarred surface of my world, littered with the dissolving remains of the Tyranid fleet and the broken bodies of my warriors. We had survived, but the cost was immeasurable. We had used a Critan stagshard as a weapon. We had forged a truce with the Eldari. We had faced the great devourer, and through blasphemy and sheer stubborn will, we had prevailed. I had chosen my path, not the path of the silent king returning to slumber, not the path of the destroyer mindlessly purging the galaxy. I had chosen the path of the survivor, the path of the heretic, the path that would make the galaxy burn. And as I looked at the silent, contained labyrinth, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning.
The silence after the storm was a physical presence, heavy and thick with the residue of cosmic violence. The air, already toxic, now carried the acrid tang of dissolved Tyranid biomatter and the ozone of overstressed Gauss technology. My tomb world was a patient in critical condition, its surface scarred by claws and its core drained to the brink of collapse to power the labyrinth's recontainment. The victory felt less like a triumph and more like a stay of execution. I stood in my throne room, the dais cold beneath my feet. The chamber was no longer a symbol of invincible power, but a command center in a ruined fortress. Nefer-At stood before me, his posture rigid, but the usual unshakable certainty was gone. He had witnessed too much. Heresy after heresy piled upon one another until the foundation of his reality had cracked. The casualty reports are comprehensive, he transmitted, the data stream flat, devoid of its usual analytical precision. Warrior legions depleted by 73%. Immortal companies at 58% effectiveness. 3 doomsday arcs destroyed. The Eternal Dominion's primary power conduit requires a full replacement. The energy drain from the labyrinth has forced us to place 60% of the tomb world back into emergency stasis. Our operational capacity is a shadow of what it was. The numbers were a death knell for the grand design. We could not reclaim an empire. We could barely defend this single wounded world. And the political situation, I asked, my gaze fixed on the holographic representation of our crippled domain. Overlord Eminem-Het has withdrawn his remaining forces to the system's edge. He transmits only one word: Oath Breaker. He will not serve. He awaits an opportunity. The Eldari Farseer, Iana, remains in the detention block. Her presence is a complication. The warriors tasked with guarding her show a 0.01% decrease in efficiency, a statistical anomaly consistent with cognitive dissonance. A complication. That was one word for it. She was a living symbol of my greatest deviation, a prisoner who was also an ally, an enemy who had helped save us. She was a paradox, and my perfectly logical kingdom had no place for paradoxes. The human vessel, I inquired. The path of inquiry remains in orbit. Magos Valerius and Colonel Voros have followed directives. They are compiling the sensor data from the Tyranid engagement as you ordered. Their usefulness, however, is reaching its terminus. The unspoken suggestion hung in the air. Terminate them, cleanse the irregularities, return to a pure, predictable state. It was what the protocol demanded. It was what the Aket Sekek of old would have done without a second thought. But I was no longer that king. The ghost in the machine had grown too loud. They stay, I said, the finality in my transmission brooking no argument. Nefer-At's silence was a roar of disapproval. Overlord, with respect, this path is unsustainable. We are accumulating vulnerabilities. The dynasty cannot survive as a collection of contradictions. We must purge the irregularities and return to the foundational protocols. We must become what we were meant to be. And what is that, Nefer-At? I asked, turning my full attention to him. The emerald light of my optics reflected in his featureless face. What were we meant to be? Mindless automatons executing a plan whose architects are gone? Slaves to a programming that leads only to a silent, sterile galaxy? We tried that. It led us here, to the brink of consumption by a mindless swarm, saved only by a heresy you find so distasteful. There is an order to the universe, he insisted, his data stream gaining strength, fueled by conviction. A logic. The Silent King's plan was that logic made manifest. We deviated, and we were punished. We must return to the path.
The silent king abandoned us. The transmission was sharp, a crack of thunder in the silent chamber. He led us into damnation and then fled the galaxy, leaving us to sleep in our tombs. His plan is a relic. The galaxy has moved on. It is filled with new gods, new devourers, new empires. The old logic does not apply here. To cling to it is to choose extinction. Then what is your alternative? Neferat challenged, the hierarchy between us fraying at the edges. To collect strays, to parley with witches, to use the weapons of our damnation as tools? You are not leading us to victory, Overlord. You are leading us into madness. He was right, and he was wrong.
I had no grand new design. I had no perfect, logical path to victory. All I had was a series of disparate, ugly choices that had, against all odds, kept us existing for one more day. I was navigating a storm in the dark, with no map and a broken compass. My alternative is survival, I said, my voice low and resonant in the vast room. Whatever the cost, whatever the heresy, the Sokar dynasty will endure, not as a perfect machine, but as a living, adapting entity. We will use every tool, form every alliance, commit every blasphemy required to ensure we do not fade into the silent dark. That is my command. That is my will. I could feel the schism forming. I saw it in his slight tilt of his head, in the minute shift of his grip on his staff. Neferat was a creature of order, and I had become a creature of chaos. Our fundamental natures were now at odds. "As you command," he pulsed, the words of formal, icy surrender. He turned and left the throne room, his footsteps echoing in the silence he left behind. I was alone, the king of a broken kingdom, surrounded by subjects who feared my decisions, rivals who hated my existence, and allies who were former enemies. I had a Ceton shard as a power source and a conscience, a Farseer hostage as an advisor and a hostage, and a handful of humans as a window into a galaxy that wanted me dead. It was not the empire I had dreamed of ruling 60 million years ago. I activated a private channel, not to Neferat, not to my cryptex, to the detention block. Farseer Ayana. Her response was weak, threaded with pain and a lingering terror. Soulless king. You saw the devourer, I said. You saw what we faced. You know it is not gone, merely inconvenienced. It will return, or another will come. The galaxy is ending, Farseer, not with a whisper, but with a billion screams. Your point, she whispered, her psychic voice fragile. I am not proposing anything. I am stating a fact. The prophecy you fear, the soulless king who remembers the sun, you believe it is me? So be it. But a king without a kingdom is nothing, and a kingdom cannot stand alone in this darkening age. I let the implication hang in the psychic space between us, a partnership, not a truce, not an alliance of convenience, but a true, lasting compact between Necron and Eldari. The thought was so monumental it was laughable. It was the stuff of the most fanciful and desperate myths. You ask for the impossible, she said,
but the refusal lacked conviction. I have already achieved the impossible today. I turned a god into a weapon. I broke a hive fleet. I saved your life. Do not speak to me of impossibility. I am speaking of necessity. I closed the channel. I had planted a seed. Whether it would grow in the salted earth of our shared history was anyone's guess. I turned my gaze inward, to the core of my tomb world, to the silent, humming prison of the Void Dragon. It was our damnation and our salvation, a burden and a weapon. It was the heart of my new dark kingdom. I am Akhet Setek, overlord of the Sokar. I have cheated death, betrayed gods, and broken every oath my kind ever held sacred. I have no future but the one I carve from the flesh of my enemies with my own hands. I have no legacy but survival. The long sleep is over. The gentle reclamation is a forgotten dream. Now begins the reign of steel, and the galaxy will learn to fear the king who remembers what it means to be alive.
The silence in the throne room after Nefer-At's departure was not empty. It was filled with the ghost of his disapproval, a static charge that made the very air hum with potential energy. I had drawn a line in the dust of our dead world, and my most loyal servant had chosen to stand on the other side. This was no longer a philosophical disagreement. It was a fracture in the foundation of my power, a crack in the dynasty itself. I accessed the tomb world's core diagnostics, bypassing the usual command channels that flowed through Nefer-At. The data was grim. The energy drain from the labyrinth was a constant bleeding wound. To keep the Void Dragon Shard contained, we were forced to keep 60% of our warriors, our production facilities, our very consciousness in a state of deep hibernation. We were a giant, shackled by its own most dangerous possession. The Tyranid attack had been a preview of our vulnerability. The next threat would not find us so inventive. It would find us weak. A priority alert, encrypted with the personal seal of Cryptek Hezert, broke my analysis. Hezert was the master of the chronomantic disciplines, a being who perceived time not as a river, but as a tapestry he could, with immense effort and risk, attempt to reweave. He was also notoriously reclusive, caring more for his experiments than for dynastic politics. For him to contact me directly was significant. Overlord. His transmission was a stream of complex temporal harmonics, difficult to decipher. The anomaly in the causality stream has intensified. Your decisions have created a branching point of unprecedented magnitude. The probability lattices are in chaos. Speak plainly, Hezert, I commanded, my patience worn thin by cosmic abstractions. Plainly? Very well. The harmonics flattened into a clearer, though still laced with scientific awe, data stream. Your actions have shattered a fixed future. The path ahead is now a forest of possibilities. In 97% of the new probability branches, the Sokar dynasty is destroyed within the next standard century. Consumed by the Tyranids, torn apart by internal strife, or unmade by the Eldari in retaliation. The numbers were a cold fist around my core processor, and the remaining 3% are strange. They are branches where you continue on this path, the path of alliance and heresy.
In these branches, the dynasty survives. It even thrives. But it becomes something other. It is no longer the Sokar of the grand design. It is a new entity, a hybrid, a perversion by the old standards. A 3% chance, a gamble with the fate of my entire people. And the prize was not a return to glory, but a transformation into something unrecognizable. What is the catalyst for these positive outcomes? I asked, clinging to the data like a drowning man to a splinter. The irregularities, Hezet responded promptly. The Eldari Farseer, the human subjects, your continued flexibility. They introduce variables the enemy cannot predict. In the branches where you purge them, where you return to rigid protocol, the outcome is universally catastrophic. The logic of our enemies is built to defeat the logic of the Necron. They cannot account for chaos. So, my madness was our only salvation. The thought was both terrifying and perversely satisfying. Continue your observations, I ordered. I want updates on any significant probability shifts. As you command, Hezet replied, and the channel closed, leaving me alone with the horrifying weight of statistical damnation. I needed to see the fracture for myself. I left the throne room and moved through the silent corridors of the tomb world. The damage was everywhere. Sections were sealed off, their atmosphere vented, their warrior complement simply gone, unmade by the tyrannid swarms. The few warriors I passed stood at their posts, but their optic glow seemed dimmer, their silence more profound. They could sense the weakness. They could feel the schism in the command network. I found Nefer-At in the Hall of Legionaries, where the battle standards of 1,000 victories from a forgotten war hung limp and dusty. He was not overseeing repairs or reviewing troop placements. He was standing before the great standard of the Sokar, a scarab clutching a dying star, as if in mourning. "You consult the ghosts of our past, Nefer-At?" I asked, my voice echoing in the vast, empty hall. He did not turn. The past had clarity. It had purpose. We knew what we were and what we were to become. "We were damned," I stated flatly. "The past is a beautiful corpse. I will not have us lie down in the grave with it." Now he turned, his optic glow bright with intensity. "And what is your future, Overlord? A court of aliens and half-mechanized primitives, ruling a kingdom that is a patchwork of heresies, using the power of the very gods who betrayed us? This is not survival. This is a slow, undignified dissolution."
It is a corruption of our fundamental nature. Our fundamental nature is what we make it. I shot back, the force of the transmission causing the dust at our feet to stir. For 60 million years, our nature was to sleep. Then it was to awaken and cleanse. Now the galaxy has presented us with new facts. We must adapt or die. You would choose death for the sake of philosophical purity. I would choose honor over existence, he fired back, and the word echoed in the hall like a gunshot. Honor, duty, loyalty to the design of our species. These are the pillars that held us together through the eons. You are tearing them down one by one. You spare the humans out of sentiment. You parley with the Eldari out of desperation. You consort with the Ceton Shard out of ambition. You are no longer my overlord. You are a rogue variable, a cancer in the system. There it was,
the final, unthinkable accusation. He had not just questioned my decisions, he had rejected my right to command. "I am the system," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "I am the Sokar dynasty. My will is its law. You have served with honor and distinction for longer than these human empires have existed, Neferat. Do not end that service now in mutiny." "It is not mutiny to stand for what is right," he said, his posture squaring, his staff coming to a ready position. It was not a threat, not yet, but a statement of readiness. "It is duty. I will not follow you into this darkness, Akhetsetek, and I will not allow you to drag our people with you." He was giving me an ultimatum. Relent, purge the irregularities, return to the path, or he would stand in my way. I looked at him, this paragon of Necron virtue, this perfect loyal machine, and I felt a profound, tragic sorrow. He was the best of what we had become, and he was my greatest enemy. "You are confined to your quarters," I commanded, the order ringing with finality. "Your command codes are suspended pending a review of your loyalty." He did not move. "You cannot suspend protocol, Overlord. You can only violate it." He turned and walked away, not toward his quarters, but down a different corridor, one that led to the barracks of the Praetorian Guard, warriors whose loyalty was to the dynasty itself, not necessarily to the individual who sat on the throne. He was making his move. The schism was no longer theoretical. It had begun. I immediately issued a counter-command, a priority override to all Praetorian units, affirming my authority as the rightful overlord. But I knew Neferat. His influence was deep, his reputation spotless. He would have his supporters. I had to act fast. I opened a channel to the one person in this tomb world who had no loyalty to the old ways, who was entirely a creature of my new chaotic reality. "Magos Valerius, report to the primary teleportation chamber immediately. Bring the colonel." Then I opened a channel to the detention block. "Farseer Ayana, your counsel is required." I was gathering my own court, a heretic, a human soldier, and a broken witch. This was the foundation of my new kingdom. This was the army with which I would fight a civil war. As I strode toward the teleportation chamber, I passed a viewing port. The path of inquiry still hung in orbit, a tiny, fragile thing against the immensity of space. But it was not alone. On the edge of the sensor range, Amenemhet's crippled fleet lingered, a vulture waiting for the lion to grow weak from its wounds. And beyond them, in the deep black, I knew the Tyranid hive mind was recalculating, learning from its defeat, preparing its next inevitable assault. I was at war with my past, my present, and my future. The walls were closing in, and the only tools I had to hold them back were the very things my people considered abominations. I reached the teleportation chamber. Valerius and Voros were there, the Magos buzzing with a nervous energy, the colonel standing with stoic resolution. A moment later, Ayana was brought in, her steps still unsteady, her gaze haunted. They looked at me, these three unlikely allies, waiting for my command. "The kingdom is divided," I said, my synthesized voice cutting through the tension. "The old guard seeks to return us to the grave. I will not allow it. But I cannot fight this war alone." I looked at each of them in turn. "You are here because you represent something new, a different way. Your survival is now inextricably linked to mine. Help me secure my throne, and you will have a place in the empire that rises from these ashes." It was not a request. It was a statement of fact. We were all damned together now. "What is your will?" Colonel Vuros asked, her voice steady, a soldier accepting a mission. I activated the teleporter, its emerald light bathing our faces in a sickly glow. "We pay a visit to our friend Amenemhet. It is time the Artoon learned that there are worse things in this galaxy than a broken oath." The light consumed us, and we teleported into the heart of the enemy's camp.
Teleporting onto the bridge of a hostile Necron command barge is an act of either supreme confidence or utter madness. The emerald light faded, and we stood in the center of Amenemhet's command deck. The scene was one of controlled chaos. The bridge was damaged, consoles sparking, the air hazy with the smell of ozone and scorched metal. Artoon warriors spun towards us, Gauss blasters rising in unison, their targeting lasers painting deadly red dots on our chests and heads. For a single, frozen heartbeat, no one moved. The shock of our sudden, unannounced appearance had paralyzed them. Amenemhet stood from his command throne, his damaged form jerking with the motion. His single, functioning optic blazed with a fury that could power a city. Satek! His transmission was a roar of pure, undiluted hatred. "You dare!" "I dare," I said aloud, my voice calm, projecting an aura of control I did not entirely feel. I gestured to my companions. "I have brought guests." The sight of the humans and the Eldari Farseer on his bridge was a psychological weapon more potent than any Gauss blaster. The Artoon warriors hesitated, their logical processes struggling to categorize this new impossible variable. An overlord did not travel with pets. An overlord certainly did not bring Xenos onto the command deck of a rival. "You have sunk to new depths of depravity," Amenemhet spat, stepping down from his dais. "You parade your corruption before me? Is this a joke?" "This is the future, Amenemhet," I replied, taking a step forward. The warriors tracking me tightened their grips on their weapons, but none fired. To fire on an overlord, even a rival, without explicit command was a profound violation of protocol. I was counting on their ingrained hierarchy to keep us alive for these first critical seconds. "The Tyranids are not gone," I stated, my voice cutting through his rage. "They are licking their wounds, analyzing the data from their defeat. They will return. And the next Hive fleet will be larger. It will be adapted to our technology. It will know our weaknesses." "Let them come," Amenemhet boomed. "The Necron are the master of the galaxy. We will break them as we broke the old ones, as we broke the Titan." You are not the Necron of the war in heaven," I fired back, my own anger rising to meet his. "You are a broken lord on a broken ship, commanding a broken dynasty. Look at yourself. You could not even best me, and you think you can stand against the end of all things?" I was pushing him, insulting him, deliberately provoking the pride that was his greatest weakness. "I challenge you," he screamed, the formal words echoing through the command deck. "Here and now, single combat, for the right to command the combined forces of the Sokar and the Artoon. Or are you too corrupted to fight your own battles? Do you need your Xenos pets to fight for you?" This was the moment. This was the gamble. A duel was the oldest, most sacred of Necron protocols. To refuse was to admit weakness, to lose all authority. To accept was to risk everything on my skill against a wounded but still deadly opponent. "I accept,"
I said, without hesitation. I turned to my companions. Stand down, do not interfere. This is my fight. Colonel Voros gave a sharp, reluctant nod. Valerius looked terrified. Iana met my gaze, and in her one good eye I saw not encouragement, but a grim understanding. She knew what was at stake. The Artoon warriors formed a wide circle, creating an impromptu arena on the command deck. Amenemhet hefted his own war scythe, the blade humming to life. My own scythe responded in kind, the air crackling with the opposing energy fields. He charged first, a furious, direct assault fueled by hatred. His scythe came down in a brutal arc meant to cleave me in two. I met it with my own, the collision sending a shockwave through the deck that knocked several warriors off their feet. The force of it was immense. He was stronger than I had anticipated, his rage lending power to his blows.
We disengaged and circled. He was a traditionalist, his style refined over millions of years, every move precise and by the book. I had been a traditionalist once too, but I had learned new tricks. I had been reminded of improvisation, of adaptation. He lunged again, a faint high, followed by a low sweep at my legs. It was a classic maneuver. The old Aketsekek would have parried and counterthrust. The new one dropped my weight, let the sweep pass over me, and rolled forward, inside his guard. I came up and slammed the pommel of my scythe into his damaged optic lens. He roared in pain and surprise, stumbling back. Green fluid, the Necron equivalent of blood, leaked from the shattered housing. I had broken the rules. It was a dirty, unorthodox move. The Artoon warriors murmured, a low hum of static that signaled their disapproval. "You fight like a savage," Amenemhet spat, clutching his face. "I fight to win," I said, pressing my advantage. I attacked now, my style a hybrid of Necron precision and something else, something raw and unpredictable, born from my fights against the Eldari and the Tyranids. I was no longer just a machine executing combat subroutines. I was a thinking, adapting being. I used the environment, kicking a sparking console towards him to disrupt his footing. I feinted towards his injured side, then reversed my grip and struck at his weapon arm. He was off balance, confused. My new way of fighting was a language he did not understand. He kept expecting the perfect, logical duel of overlords. I was giving him a street brawl. With a final desperate roar, he committed to an overhead strike, putting all his power into it. It was a killing blow, but it left him completely exposed. I didn't try to block it. I sidestepped, and as his scythe bit deep into the deck where I had been standing, I brought my own weapon around in a flat, horizontal arc. The blade of my war scythe passed through his neck. There was no spray of blood, only a sharp crack of sundered metal and a violent shower of sparks. Amenemhet's head, its single optic wide with shock, tumbled from his shoulders and clattered to the floor. His body remained standing for a moment, frozen in its final action, before it too collapsed into a heap of lifeless necrodermis. Silence. The Artoon warriors stared at the corpse of their overlord. I stood over him, my scythe still humming. I had won. By the oldest of our laws, the Artoon were now mine. I turned to face them, my gaze sweeping across their featureless metal faces. "The old king is dead," I announced, my voice ringing with authority. "His way is dead with him. I am your overlord now. Your dynasty is now part of the Sokar.
But understand this, the Sokar you serve is not the one you knew. We will not be slaves to the past. We will not kneel to dead protocols. We will survive. We will adapt. We will conquer. And we will do it with any tool, any ally, any weapon we can find. I pointed my war scythe at the headless body of Eminem-Het. Let his fate be a lesson to any who would stand in our way. The age of silence is over. The age of steel has begun, and I am its king. Not a single warrior raised his weapon. One by one they knelt, the sound of metal knees hitting the deck, a rolling wave of submission. The Artun were broken. They were mine. I looked at my small, strange court. Valerius looked awestruck. Voros looked grimly impressed. Iana looked resigned. She saw the inevitability of it now. The soulless king was gathering his power. But as I stood there, victorious, a new overlord of a broken and combined dynasty, I felt no triumph, only the immense crushing weight of the path I had chosen. I had won the battle, but the war for the soul of the Necrons had only just begun, and the greatest enemy was not waiting in the stars. He was waiting for me back in my own tomb world. His name was Neferet.
The return to my tomb world was a conqueror's procession, but it felt like a march to the gallows. The Artun fleet, now under my command, moved into a defensive formation around the Eternal Dominion. Their ships were scarred and depleted, but they added crucial mass to my crippled forces. It was a show of strength for the benefit of the one person who would not be impressed, Neferet. As we phased back into the throne room, the atmosphere was thick with impending violence. My personal Lich Guard were present, their loyalty unwavering, but they were outnumbered by the Praetorians who now lined the walls. Their allegiance was to the dynasty, and they stood as judges, their impassive faces turned towards me. And before my throne stood Neferet, not in a posture of submission, but of defiance. He had not been idle. The tomb world's internal security networks were under his control. The primary stasis chambers, holding the bulk of my dormant legions, were locked down under his command codes. He held a knife to the dynasty's throat, and he was waiting for me to blink. "You return with more strays, I see," he pulsed, his gaze sweeping over the Artun officers who had accompanied me. "And you have added regicide to your list of heresies. You killed a fellow overlord in personal combat. You consolidate your power through bloodshed. You are becoming everything the Necron were created to surpass. I am doing what is necessary to ensure we have a future in which to debate philosophy," I replied, my voice calm as I walked towards the dais. The Praetorians did not move to stop me. Protocol still held, if only by a thread. I was still the rightful overlord. The Artun are now part of the Sokar. Our strength is increased. Our chances of survival have improved. "At what cost?" he demanded, turning to address the Praetorians, the cryptecs, the few lords who had gathered. "Look at him. He consorts with the flesh creatures who disturbed our slumber. He parleys with the Eldari witches who have been our enemies since time began. He wields the power of the Citan, the betrayers of our species. He has killed a brother overlord and absorbed his dynasty through force. This is not strength. This is the path of a despot, a destroyer. He is leading us not to survival, but to damnation." His words were calculated, precise,
designed to appeal to the core programming of every Necron in the room. He was painting me as the ultimate irregularity, a virus in the system that needed to be purged. I reached my throne, but did not sit. I stood before it, facing him, facing them all. Nefer-At speaks of damnation, I said, my voice carrying through the great hall. He fears corruption. He fears the loss of our purity. But I ask you this, what is more pure? To adhere to a failed plan and die with clean hands? Or to grasp the filthy, bloody tools of survival and live? I activated the main holographic display. It showed the system, my tomb world, the combined fleet. Then it zoomed out, showing the galactic sector. I overlaid the data Ayana had given me, the known movements of the Tyranid hive fleets. A creeping tide of red, consuming system after system, moving inexorably in our direction. The Great Devourer does not care for our protocols. It does not respect our history. It knows only hunger. We have faced a tendril of it, and we bled to stop it. The main body is coming, and when it arrives, it will not ask if we fought with honor. It will only ask if we are food. I turned my gaze to the Praetorians. You are the guardians of the dynasty. Your purpose is its preservation. Judge me not by the old laws, but by the results of my rule. I found us weak and divided. I have made us stronger. I found us blind. I have given us eyes. I gestured to Valerius and Voros, who stood silently to the side. I found us facing annihilation. I used every weapon at my disposal to turn it back, even the weapons we fear. I let the image of the Tyranid fleet hang in the air. I offer you a return to the past, a beautiful, silent, dignified death. I offer you a future, a difficult, ugly, blasphemous future, but a future nonetheless. The choice is yours. Follow him into the grave, or follow me into the fire. The silence in the throne room was absolute. I had thrown the dice. I had appealed not to their logic, but to their most fundamental imperative, survival. Nefer-At saw the shift. He saw the Praetorians hesitating, their weapons lowering slightly. He saw the cryptex exchanging silent data bursts.
His cause was crumbling. Do not listen to his lies, he transmitted, a desperate edge to his signal. He will destroy us all. He never finished the sentence. A single, sharp crack echoed through the hall. It was not the report of a Gauss weapon, but the simpler, cruder sound of a human, solid projectile sidearm. A perfect, round hole appeared in the center of Nefer-At's forehead. His optic glow flickered, died, and he stood frozen for a moment, a statue of shock and betrayal, before collapsing to the floor with a final, heavy clang. All eyes turned to Colonel Helena Voros. She stood with her smoking sidearm held in a steady, two-handed grip, her face a mask of cold professionalism. The threat to the command structure has been neutralized, she said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. My apologies for the interruption, Overlord. It seemed efficient. I looked from her to the body of my oldest friend and greatest enemy, to the assembled Necron court who were now looking at me with a new, terrifying kind of awe. The human had not acted on my command. She had acted on her own initiative,
perceiving a threat to the alliance that guaranteed her survival. She had chosen a side, and she had chosen mine. It was the ultimate heresy, the ultimate irregularity. A human had just decided the fate of a Necron dynasty. And in doing so, she had cemented my power absolutely. No one would challenge me now, not after this. They were too terrified of the new, unpredictable world I ruled. I looked down at Nefer-Ayat's body. There was no grief. There was only a cold, hollow finality. The last link to the king I had been was severed. The past was truly dead. I commanded, "Take the body to the reclamation furnaces. His components will be recycled with honor. He served the dynasty well in his way." As warriors moved to carry out the order, I finally sat upon my throne. It felt different. It no longer felt like a relic. It felt like a command post, the seat of a warlord. "Now," I said, my gaze sweeping over my silent, obedient court, "we have a kingdom to rebuild and a galaxy to prepare for." I turned to Iana. "Farseer, you will work with Cryptek Hezut. Use your sight and his science. Find me a weakness in the hive mind, not a tactical one, a strategic one." I turned to Valerius. "Magos, you will have full access to our non-classified databanks on material science. I want your assessment on integrating Imperial warp drive principles with our inertialess drives. Find us a way to move faster." I turned to the assembled lords and cryptechs. "The reclamation is cancelled. The Great Sleep is over. Our new purpose is survival through supremacy. We will research. We will adapt. We will form alliances of convenience with any who share our enemy, and we will build an empire that can stand against the end of all things." I leaned forward, the emerald light of my optics casting long shadows. "This is my will. This is the law. Let the galaxy burn. We will be the fire." The reign of steel had begun.
The silence that followed my decree was not the silence of the tomb, nor the silence of shock that had followed Nefer-At's execution. This was a new silence, a working silence, the silence of a machine that has been given a new, terrible purpose and has begun with relentless efficiency to carry it out. The body of my oldest friend was gone, recycled into the cold, pragmatic economy of the dynasty. There were no eulogies, no monuments. He had become a statistic, a percentage point of regained resources. It was the most Necron of endings, and it was my doing. I had not just killed him, I had erased him. The ghost of Akhet-Setek, the king who valued loyalty, screamed into the void within me, and I smothered the sound with the cold logic of necessity. I dismissed the court. The Praetorians returned to their posts, their loyalty now unquestioning, forged in the fire of heresy and sealed with human lead. The cryptechs and lords scattered to their tasks, the weight of my new directives settling upon their mechanical minds. The Age of Steel was not a proclamation, it was a fundamental recalibration of our entire existence. I was alone on my throne, but I was never truly alone anymore. The data streams were a constant river,
reports from the integrated Artoon forces, power consumption analyses from the Labyrinth's containment field, preliminary schematics from Magus Valerius, his primitive human mind struggling with concepts that predated his species, yet producing fascinating, clumsy insights. Status updates from Colonel Voros, who had taken it upon herself to organize a joint security protocol between her human crew and my immortal guards. It was an absurd, impossible partnership, and it was working. And then there was the other presence, a faint psychic whisper, like a draft from a forgotten room. You sit heavily on your throne, soulless king. Iona, her mind, though broken, was still connected to mine, a consequence of my brutal mental invasion. She was a ghost in my machine, a permanent, unwanted advisor. Thrones are not made for comfort, I pulsed back, not bothering to shield the weariness in my transmission. They are made to bear weight. You bear the weight of a species, she observed, and you have chosen to bend its spine to your will, to make it something it was never meant to be. What was it meant to be, Farseer? I asked, my attention divided between her and a report on Gauss blaster efficiency. A museum piece? A perfectly preserved fossil from a dead age? We were meant to rule the galaxy. I am simply finding a new way to do it. You are creating a monster. Her thought was laced with a tragic certainty. A hybrid of cold logic and desperate passion, a thing that knows neither peace nor honor, only the hunger to persist. You are becoming more like the devourer than you know. Her words struck a chord I did not want to acknowledge. The Tyranids consumed biomass. Was I not consuming ideologies, consuming traditions, consuming my own past to fuel a future that had no shape, no name? I was the king of a realm of contradictions, and my crown was made of shattered protocols. I rose from my throne and walked to the great observatory. The crystal dome showed the void, now patrolled by the combined fleets of the Sokar and the Artoon. It was a show of force, a statement to anyone who might be watching. But my gaze was drawn past them, to the pinprick of light that was the path of inquiry. That tiny, fragile ship was the seed from which this entire madness had grown. It was the pebble that started the avalanche. A new data stream, encrypted and tagged with the complex temporal harmonics of Cryptek Hezut, demanded my attention. Overlord, the probability lattices have stabilized, the branch is set. And, I asked, my core feeling cold. The dynasty survives, for now. The probability of destruction within the century has dropped to 64%. The actions you have taken, the integration, the alliances have created a stable, if incredibly volatile, new reality. He paused, but the path is narrow. It requires constant aggressive action. Any reversion to passivity, any attempt to return to the old ways results in immediate catastrophic failure. You have set us on a knife's edge. 64%. Still a coin toss, but better than 97. Progress, bought with the blood of a friend and the soul of my people. And the nature of this stable branch, I asked, almost afraid of the answer. What do we become? "The data is unclear," Jesus replied, his transmission flickering with unusual uncertainty. "The future is a fog, but the entity we become, it is not listed in any historical record. It has no dynastic name. The archives have no classification for it. It is something new, something born of your will."
Something new. The words should have been terrifying. To a Necron, the new was synonymous with error, with degradation. But I felt a strange, forbidden thrill. We were not just surviving, we were evolving. Forced into it by my hand, yes, but evolving nonetheless. I closed the channel and turned from the stars. I had work to do. The next cycle was a whirlwind of blasphemous activity. I walked through halls that had known only the silent tread of Necrons for 60 million years, and now echoed with the clumsy footsteps of human tech adepts, supervised by impatient cryptechs. I witnessed Magos Valerius, his face alight with a religious fervor, directing a team of servitors under the cold gaze of an immortal, attempting to interface an imperial logic engine with a Necron data port. It was a comedy of errors, a clash of civilizations that should have ended in vaporized flesh. Instead, it produced a spark of genuine insight, a new way to filter sensor data that even my cryptechs had not considered. I found Colonel Voros in the training halls, demonstrating Imperial close-quarters combat techniques to a squad of Lich Guard. The sight was surreal, the fluid, organic movements of a human soldier mirrored by the hulking metallic forms of my personal guard. They would never be as fast as her, but they learned, they adapted, they incorporated the principles into their own brutal style. And in the deepest sanctum, I found Ayana. She stood before the Tesseract labyrinth, not as a prisoner, but as a scholar. Her hand was outstretched, not touching the golden surface, but hovering inches from it, her mind probing the edges of the prison. "It is dreaming," she whispered as I approached. "Its dreams are the death of stars, the end of time. It is not malicious, not in the way we understand. It simply is. Entropy is its nature." "Can you communicate with it?" I asked, the question itself a heresy of unimaginable scale. She shook her head, a very human gesture she must have picked up from the others. "No, but I can listen, and in its dreams I hear echoes. It knows the devourer. It knows the hive mind is a consciousness, a thing of order imposed on chaos. The dragon hates order. It is a potential ally against the Tyranids, a profoundly dangerous, untrustworthy one, but a potential one. An alliance with a Cetan shard, the final unthinkable step, the ultimate weapon in my arsenal of heresies. The thought was so monstrous it felt inevitable. This was my court, this was my kingdom, a patchwork of metal and flesh, of logic and prophecy, of science and sorcery. It was ugly. It was unstable. It was a glorious, terrifying mess. I returned to my throne,
The reports continued to flow. The dynasty was rebuilding not according to a grand preordained design, but organically, chaotically, solving problems as they arose. It was inefficient. It was illogical. It was alive. I am Akhet Setek. I remember the sun. I remember the feel of grass under my feet, the sound of laughter in my halls, the terrible, beautiful fragility of a heartbeat. I remember what it was to be alive, and in surrendering that, in becoming this thing of metal and memory, I was given a gift no other Necron possessed, the capacity to truly understand what we had lost. And that understanding has become my weapon. I will not lead my people back to the silence. I will not give them the hollow victory of a sterile galaxy. I will drag them, kicking and screaming if I must, into a future. I will force them to feel, to adapt, to change. I will make them so unpredictable, so blasphemous, so utterly alive in their own undead way that the coming darkness will not know how to consume us. The Tyranids will return. The Eldari will seek revenge. The Imperium will eventually notice the anomaly in its backyard. The Silent King may one day return to see what has become of his empire. Let them come. They expect the Necrons of legend, a silent, implacable tide of death. They expect unyielding logic and ancient protocols. They will find me instead. A king who remembers warmth, ruling a kingdom of cold steel. A ghost who commands an army of the damned. A heretic who has torn up the sacred texts and is writing a new Bible in the blood of gods and the fire of stars. The galaxy is ending, but for the Sokar dynasty, for my court of the damned, for the reign of steel, it is just the beginning.